Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel and welcome to TechStrong TV. Today's Tuesday, January 26th. Hope you're doing well. We've had just a crazy time here at Media Ops with the beginning of the year, ramping up. We have so many events and activities going on. I haven't had a chance to host my own TechStrong TV show. Many thanks to Charlene O'Hanlon, our Chief Content Officer, who's been sitting in and truthfully doing a better job than me anyway. But I'm back today, and I'm happy to tell you what we have in store. Before I go into the specifics of this show, I want to recommend that you guys all go over to predict2021.com. That's our virtual event that we do every year in January, taking a look at the year ahead. We just wrapped it last week. It was live. We had over 60 speakers, over 50 sessions, all kinds of predictions around cyber, DevOps, cloud native, digital transformation, VCs, practitioners, vendors, analysts, myself, some amazing panels. Go check it out. It's all still available on demand there. Of course, you can't interact on the with the sponsors and speakers, but you can see the sessions. So predict2021.com. Check it out. Let me tell you what we have in store here for you today. We have some great interviews. We're breaking some big news I think you want to pay attention to. First up this morning, we're going to interview Corey Hulen, who's a CTO co-founder at Mattermost. And, Corey's going to talk about a theme that is going to be repeated, I think, a few times today, and that is the ascendancy of the developer and how important developers, especially, how important developers are becoming in organizations, especially with digital transformation taking on an added impact. So he's going to tell us what they're seeing at Mattermost as DevOps and developers ascend and rise in importance to the organization. Last year I called it the democratization of IT. As we started to focus not just on the C-level, but at the developer level. We're now seeing the continuation of that with these developers becoming more and more important in the organization. So we'll check in with what Corey has to say. After that, I'm really excited to be breaking some big news with you all. My guests are Shlomi Ben-Chaim and Scott Johnston. Shlomi, of course, is CEO at Jfrog. Scott is the CEO at Docker. Jfrog and Docker recently announced their significant upgrade to their partnership, where now Docker Hub, container images and so forth actually can be delivered via Jfrog, Artifactory, and X-Ray, and security. And it really is a very, very tight integration, and the two CEOs promise we'll see more. We'll see more at both DockerCon, which is upcoming, I think, in May, and Jfrog SwampUp, which is upcoming in June. I think if you go to docker.com/DockerCon, you get more information on DockerCon, and jfrog.com/SwampUp for JFrog. Anyway, so big news there with Scott and Shlomi. I was happy to have them both on. After that, we have a part 2 of a new podcast we're doing here on TechStrong TV. It's called The Haunted Hacker. It's by Mike Jones, who's one of the founders of the Hacktivist Anonymous group. And Mike has some activists from Ghost Exodus, Jesse McGraw, and Patrick, a.k.a. John 5, from ETN Anonymous on. This is part 2. We played part 1, I believe, last week, or maybe it was yesterday, and part 3 will be coming up. So stay tuned for that as a regular feature here on TechStrong TV. If you ever want to just watch all of them, though, that you can get them all up on Digital Anarchist as well. After that, we're going to have something old. We have from the Department of Energy, Russ Savage, talking DevOps monitoring to the next, not Department of Energy. What am I thinking? I saw DOE and I had a momentary lapse. From DevOps experience, We have Russ Savage taking DevOps monitoring to the next level. And this is a 5-step guide to monitoring Nirvana. Okay, sorry, I guess I kind of messed that one up. I'm out of practice. Anyway, after that, Charlene O'Hanlon, our Chief Content Officer, will be on, and Charlene's going to give us the news around the media ops websites. Charlene also has a great interview today with Jacqueline Miller of NTT Managed Services America. On diversity and tech and cyber, as well as trends happening and expected in 2021. And then Charlene also has a great preview of the rest of this week's webinars, and we've got some great ones coming up. So stay tuned for that. After that, we'll head over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. And Mitch has a video today with John Grange and Charlie Cuddy, CTO, Cloud Solution Engineer, respectively. And Mitch is going to have some good, comes out of Ops Compass, some good stuff there. So over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. And then I'll be back to wrap things up. Just another day here on TechStrong TV. Let's take a quick commercial break and we'll be back with our first guest. So Corey Hulen has been CTO co-founder at Mattermost. You know, they cater to the developer and DevOps team. They've done a great job. You know, and they're seeing trends, and if it was just them, you'd say it's one voice. But we're seeing these trends as well, and that is the ascendancy of the DevOps developers. Corey's going to tell us more about it. Let's go to our interview right now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV episode. My guest for this episode is Corey Hulen. He's CTO at Mattermost. Hey Corey, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So Corey, well, you know what? Let's start with this. We haven't really covered a lot of Mattermost here on TechStrong TV. I don't know how many people in our audience are savvy or know about them. Why don't we start with a little Mattermost background and maybe a bit about your own background?
Sure. Let me kind of talk about Mattermost, and I can go to my own background. So, Mattermost is an open source collaboration platform. We're really focused on that DevOps space, that DevSecOps collaboration. So when you think about channel-based or topic-based communication or messaging, that's square in our wheelhouse. I would say the areas where we really shine is around things like high trust and privacy, especially around some of your most important tools or tooling or whatever's controlling your sort of DevOps environment. So that's a little bit about Mattermost. A little bit about myself. I'm co-founder and CTO of Mattermost. I've been doing this for, I've been around for, 5-6 years now. I have to go look that up. That's a long time. Which has been great. Previously, I was co-founder and co-founder and CTO of Temple AI. It was a smart calendaring or smart AI app spun out of Stanford Research. Sort of the same place that gave you the mouse and Siri and stuff like that. And then before that, I was a lead engineer and architect at Microsoft in the business applications and SharePoint teams and stuff like that. So a little bit about myself, but yeah. Very cool, man.
Very cool, Corey. So, Corey, as we were talking off camera, right? In a horrific year of 2020, one of the bright spots was certainly digital transformation and how it enabled so many companies that, quite frankly, in 1 week had to close up their offices, close up their stores, close up their business, send everyone home, and then figure out a way to keep the lights on, so to speak, right? To keep people paid and keep customers buying. And, digital transformation was the great enabler of a lot of this, right? And when we talk about digital transformation, really, it's kind of code word for software, right? I know we've said software is eating the world. Mark Andreessen said it years and years ago, but it really was the story of 2020. And when we look at software and how it's done today, man, it's all, it's about DevOps. It's about DevOps and lean and agile and all this stuff. It would seem Mattermost is right there in the middle of that, right? That's kind of where you guys sit and play.
Yeah, for us as a business, obviously this last year, everyone moving, driving hard this direction has been great for us. I think kind of key to what you said, software is leading, software operators and builders is leading that, right? Software operators and builders, they want their Formula One cars, right? They don't want their everyday sedans, right? And so, for us being in that space, sort of, built for developers by developers, that kind of attitude is really driving a lot of our use cases, which has been great. And we've seen tremendous growth in that area, obviously. And it's been accelerated because of stuff like COVID, but I think, the world was going that direction anyway. It's just kind of like slamming the gas pedal down on people moving this direction. So it's been very challenging for us, obviously, but it's been also very, very great for us in terms of responding to that sort of demand. So,
sure. I saw a recent survey from McKinsey and Company, right, on digital transformation across the world. They broke it into like APAC, EMEA, and North America for 4 years. 2017 and 2018, digital transformation was flat to a small growth. Actually, 2018 to 2019 was a huge uptick in this across the world, not just North America, though North America probably had the biggest uptick in 2019 versus EMEA and Asia Pac. And then, of course, 2020, boom, it's escape velocity, right? Went from about 30 or 35 or 32 in Asia and Europe to like 53 and 55. And then in North America, went from like 40 to 65 in 2020. But what it really showed is that really this digital transformation move really started in 2019, really grabbing, getting momentum. And 2020 just, as you said, accelerated it through the roof. And part of it, as we said, is the developers and, what'd you call them, digital operators?
Software operators and builders.
Software operators, yep. And it's funny, we started something last year called Recruit Ops. And my partners and I were, truth be told, I wasn't the driving force behind that. One of my partners was. And I was like, you really think this is a great time to be opening a recruiting business, right in the middle of this? And he's like, no, people can't get enough developers, right? The one thing they need are more developers. And it really is true. The developers are kind of the apex predator of the food chain in many, many organizations. Wondering what you guys see with this.
No, we definitely do, right? We see that all the time in terms of developer bringing in tools, bringing in DevOps, practices, right? And especially organizations that are on that like lower down in that curve of needing to catch up, right? And we always kind of describe that, if you want to bring sort of DevOps and DevOps mindset to your organization, we always kind of describe it as like a multi-step process, right? Of you kind of start with all the manual things. I think first for us, obviously, because we're Mattermost, like our big belief is you need that channel-based or topic-based communication platform. Like you need that in your organization, especially when you're talking about a DevOps organization. And then we always encourage people like start there. Start with a manual process, right? And then start automating all the easy things. And then as you get further and further down into that sort of that DevOps integration tool set or whatever, then you start automating all the harder stuff in your organization. And it's kind of like what you said, like software's eating the world, right? And you want your command and control system for that software to be accessible to all of your software operators and builders in the system. In your company, but across, in this day and age, across all these different remote locations and stuff like that. And so for us, we've seen a lot of people accelerating sort of what we call that sort of shared command line or shared communication experience where you have, let's talk about like an incident response or something like that. You're having an outage at your company and you want all your engineers and SRE people in the same sort of war room, sort of just like attacking that problem, right, through tools integration, bringing that all together in some central collaboration space. So, yeah, I mean, like we see a lot of that happening, a lot of that obviously accelerating, like I said, especially in this, sort of remote first world that we've been living in for the last year. And it's fun to see that change, and it's fun to see the different organizations, like some who are very savvy, who have already been doing this, and others who are kind of forced to do it, and them kind of running to us like, hey, how do we do this? And we always kind of walk them through that multi-step process of like, just start manually, then go automated, then start going crazy with bots and stuff like that. It's been a fun experience to see.
Absolutely. But you know how the world is, Corey. What have you done for me lately? All right. So that's 2020, right? We're moving into 2021. Where do you think this, do we see another huge leap this year? Does it kind of normalize a bit? What will fuel it? What is Mattermost going to do to help?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we've been putting a lot of effort in incident response, incident management, our DevOps command center. So we kind of envision like exactly that. Like if you look over the last couple of years, not just the last year, but the last couple of years, right? Everyone's been coming to this sort of collaboration space, especially this topic-based or channel-based space. We started investing a lot in what we call incident management, which is actually building tools into our collaboration platform. Like if you think of messaging as a collaboration platform, what kind of tools would you want on top of that platform? For us, it's incident response, it's DevOps command center, it's starting to build sort of practice templates, best case, sort of best case of or sort of that practice template of what people use in their environment. Like, so if you talk about something like let's talk about security incident response. What's the best practice around that? What's a tool that helps you work in your collaboration platform and helps you go through that sort of response? And then not only that, but capture that sort of post-mortem and summarize it for, let's say, executives in the organization to give true visibility or a true dashboard sort of into your business in terms of in terms of incidents and stuff like that. And so we've been putting a lot of effort because we find people do that today anyway, right? They're already doing incident management in their collaboration platform, but it's very unstructured. So a large part of where we've been kind of investing time is like, how can we bring some structure to that incident management, that collaboration piece that's already happening in an unstructured way? How can we bring tooling, integrations, whatever it is that helps those people, right? In that incident, in that outage or whatever's going on. So we see that as a large sort of step forward going forward is, everyone has their raw collaboration tools today, but I think we see it transforming over the next year into having really the tools that are really helpful or directing you in terms of that, like incident response, in terms of an incident or it's kind of like what we call it incident management collaboration, right? Because it's kind of both those things. It's not only incident management, but it's the collaboration piece coming in with it as well. And I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen over the next year or two in that space.
Well, do tell.
I mean, I think it's exactly that. I think, as these companies become, as all these companies become more and more remote, more and more online, you want that sort of shared history or that what we call shared command line. And that's where you're doing things like, a few years ago, they called it things like chat ops, but you want people being in that shared channel where they're running things like / commands, getting history of logs. We always describe it as we see that interaction of what we call structured and unstructured data coming together in your collaboration piece, right? And what we mean by that, so when we say structured data, that's data coming from your log analytics tools, from integrations. It's very structured. It's pulling that data together into a channel. When you talk about unstructured data, that's data coming from humans, right? That's data coming from humans who are looking at that structured data, responding to figuring out the problem, right? And in the DevOps world, like you need both, right? Like you have the outage, you need the data, you need the humans there to figure out, like scratch their head and figure out, okay, like we need to make sense of this data. Like let's figure out what's going on. And the key piece or the most important piece is making sure everyone is in the same room. And then the sort of key piece on top of that is making sure everyone's in the same room and has the right security context or clearance to see the data that they're seeing, right? When you're talking about, a bank having an outage or a government having an outage or a threat or a security threat, that's a very different type of response than if your internal build tool is going down, right? So it's not only making sure you're having the right structured data and unstructured data in the right place, it's making sure you're having the right people and the right security in place to deal with that outage as well. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen, and a lot of interesting stuff that's going to happen in that area. And we're definitely gathering feedback from our customers, putting a lot of that into our incident management or incident collaboration tool going forward. And so I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the world changes in the next year or two.
Absolutely. You brought up the whole security and space and all of that. Certainly one of the big stories at the end of 2020 coming into 2021 was the SolarWinds solar flare attack. And I'm of the opinion it can happen to any of us at any time, right? I mean, this stuff's going to happen. But in many ways, this was a uniquely DevOps, DevSecOps type of security incident in that it was a supply chain attack, right? And this is, there's been other breaches. You've got your garden variety phishing and ransomwares and all that crap. But, a supply chain attack kind of strikes at the heart of DevOps, DevSecOps, right? How do we trust the software we're deploying, that we're developing in pipeline and deploying?
I think that's a great question, right? And for us, we attack that question in a very unique or interesting way. We're an open source company. Like, one of our big beliefs, obviously, is having that open source software out there, having thousands of eyeballs looking at that, having different, whether it be agencies or other people's security teams looking at that. I'm a big believer in that. That helps improve the quality of all the software, not just quality, but quality from a security standpoint as well. And so for us, that's one of the big things that we obviously believe in. Data sovereignty, another thing, is another big thing for us. So, Mattermost runs on-prem. So if you want to run this behind your sort of most secure networks, your most secure firewall, if you want to own all your own data, you can do that. So I think, don't get me wrong, everyone's, everyone has the ability to be attacked. Security is always one of those things where you got to, it's not about 100% protection. It's about ratcheting up the protection and making sure you're doing better than the opponent. But I'm a firm believer in terms of having a very open attitude, having a company that is very invested in that security research, making sure that we're not only protecting our software, like we do a lot of research in protecting other third-party libraries that we use upstream. Some of them actually don't even use upstream. We find them because they're upstream and we go report them in different places. And I think just being that good actor in the community is important. But like I said, for me, it really comes back to, I truly believe open source is a great way to solve this problem, because you have all this open code base. There's a lot of different people looking at it. And so I'm not to say it's impossible, because everything's possible. But my belief is because of that openness, because of that publicness, you have a lot higher degree of protection versus some of these other style attacks. So yeah, versus and of course that's all locked down and closed, and who knows what's going on or who's installed what, that kind of stuff.
That was always one of the big pluses with open source, right? Is that there were many eyes on the software. I remember, was it OpenVPN was one of the first big open source whole security things. And it turned out, even with all those eyes on there, no one really looked, right? And so we've seen it. We've had open source, right? The Struts 2 kind of thing with Equifax. We've had open source security things. You know what, Corey, I've been involved in open source for 20 plus years. And I really believe that in the bottom of my heart, that open source, the model, made it inherently easier to secure, not more secure necessarily, but easier to secure.
The opportunities there, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right. I'm of the opinion that in today's world, I don't know how many people really test open source or closed source, right? If we really test everything we should test from a security point of view, or if we even are capable of doing so. I think to a certain degree, excuse my language, but shit's going to happen, right? And we got to be prepared for when it does, right? And that's what incident response is about. And that's got to be part of your strategy too. Not when, or not if, but when something happens. How do you respond?
I think that's key, right? Having those playbooks in place, like exactly that. Like, what do you do when you respond? Like, what do you do when you're a bank and you have, nation state level attacks, right? Do you have a secure enclave that you can run to that's independent, that's out of your network? I mean, the biggest one and the most obvious one is, most of these attacks are now coming from internal bad actors, right? That's a lot hard. That's really hard to defend against, right? And so I think you're right. I think it's about, it's not only about trying to make your software as secure as possible. Everyone's trying that. You're right, but it still has holes in it. It still has security issues. So then you start talking about what are the practices that you have in place to recover from that, right? Whether that's compliance, whether that's auditing and logging, just to being able to track to figure out what's going on, and then some sort of playbook in terms of how do you respond to this incident. We see that in a lot of our industry, obviously, because a lot of high trust customers we deal with, they end up setting up, a secondary secure Mattermost enclave. Just as a bastion, right? Something to run to when, like, hey, because they run these types of scenarios all the time. Like, what if all of our internal network is compromised, right? We need someplace outside that internal network to run to exactly that, to handle our incident management, to handle our incident response. We see a lot of red team, blue teams playing with Mattermost as well, in terms of them trying to find each other and them setting up a secure Mattermost outside their instance or whatever. And it's always fun to see those cases. But I think you're right. I think it's about all that practice and response and what is your playbook to do, because the reality is every software in the world is insecure, right? It's just a matter of time before somebody finds it, whatever. And there's been really big ones where people are like, this is very secure. That even stuff that has had thousands of security researchers pour over it, right? Over time, like something pops out of it and you're like, that is very unique and novel way. Very interesting hole they found. Then it's your practices that kick in after that. So,
right. There's a little bit of mouse and cat, mousetrap game here, right? The mice are always kind of one step ahead. Anyway, hey, man, we're about out of time. Corey, we didn't mention Mattermost's website. Is Mattermost.com?
Yep, Mattermost.com. Yep.
Okay. Hey, man, thanks for coming on and joining us. Come back and talk to us some more.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Corey Hewlin, CTO at Mattermost here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest. Bye-bye.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
I know Scott Johnston, CEO of Docker, even before he was at Docker, and of course, Shlomi Ben Chaim, CEO at Jfrog, is an old friend now as well. I was really happy to hear about the news of these two organizations really doing a very, very tight integration. I was happy they announced it here with us on TechStrong TV and that they have more in store. To find out, you're going to need to listen in. Let's now go to our interview with Shlomi Ben Chaim, CEO Jfrog, and Scott Johnston of Docker.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. We've got some really hot news we're breaking this morning. Let me first introduce you to my two guests. First of all, on your screen, he's on my wall here, but it's Scott Johnston of Docker. Scott's been with Docker for as long as I've been doing DevOps.com, I think. So, hey, Scott, welcome.
Thanks,
good to
Alan.
have
great
you
to
here.
Be here. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. And joining Scott and I is my good friend Shlomi Ben Chaim, CEO, co-founder at Jfrog. He's also been at Jfrog for as long as I've been doing this. Shlomi, my friend, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Happy Friday.
Well, it's actually Tuesday. Remember, this is the magic of television. But it's okay. Guys, we are breaking some big news today, and that is a partnership announced between Docker and Jfrog, two big players here in the ecosystem. Which one of you wants to take first crack at talking about this partnership and what it's about?
Shlomi, go for it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Shlomi.
Yeah, well, I think, guys, there's nothing new about the fact that the modern cloud-native world was introduced to a change that Docker brought a few years ago with the containers philosophy, the containers technology. Every developer on the planet that wants to be faster, secure, and more efficient will use containers. That's a fact already. Now, if you want to complete this pipeline all the way from the hub, from the origin of the containers to your customers and to your internal customers, you will use a registry. This is where Docker and Jfrog decided to join forces and to bring the power of the hub and the power of the registry together. Now, the most popular hub for containers, or what we call the reservoir for Docker images, is Docker Hub. And the most popular enterprise-ready hybrid registry is JFrog Artifactory. Now, imagine what happened when both of them come together, how easier the developer life become and how frictionless it is. So that was phase one in our mind. This is where Scott and the team was, getting us into the hub, and we got them into the registry. And I think that the developer's life will be happier now.
Now,
Absolutely.
I'll just double down on that, Alan, and just plus 1,000 Shlomi's comments. And the focus is on how do you help developers focus on their application and get those applications conceptualized, built, shipped, tested, and into production as quickly as possible. And to do that, they rely on quality content, quality building blocks, and they require secure software supply chains to make sure that what they're putting into their applications is trustworthy. And so this combination of the Docker official images coming from Docker Hub, being curated and distributed throughout the organization in a trustful manner with JFrog Artifactory, being consumed by the developer on Docker desktop inside the enterprise, it's an end-to-end secure supply chain of quality content that helps them identify the right building blocks and build and ship their apps faster. We couldn't be more excited to partner with JFrog on it.
Absolutely. It's a great thing. Before we dive into the particulars here of this partnership and the technical details of it, Shlomi, you said something, you started the conversation off with something that I want to emphasize to our audience. We have DevOps.com, Container Journal, Security Boulevard. So we're all over this. This is our niche, this is our farm. And I'm often, I wonder and I shake my head that we have seen so many things in the cloud native world, right? Words like Kafka and service mesh and, Linkerd and all the things that we see from CNCF and of course Kubernetes, right? Amazing stuff. And we've built a whole new stack. It's a new stack. I grew up, I grew up a long time ago, but I went from the Novell to Unix, and then the Linux stack, the LAMP stack, as we called it, which the modern internet was built on. And we have this new cloud native stack now. And sometimes I think we lose sight that the atom, the building block of this universe was the container. Without Solomon and what he did with the container when they started Docker, you don't have all of this other stuff to build on, because whether you're talking serverless or whatever you're talking, it's still built on that container. And it's important for us to recognize that is, that's the atom from which the molecules of this universe are constructed. So that's number one. Number two, I love this partnership because I think one of the things when I look at, I don't have a horse in the race, right? But when we look at different repositories and a Docker Hub, an Artifactory, there's GitHub, there's Git that, there's plenty of them. I was afraid we were going to have a balkanization. Does one developer or one team need to be pulling from 8 different repos, right? 8 different vendors, all different security. This seems to be a consolidation, right? Where now, it's 2 different repos, but they're one control. And I assume like a Jfrog X-ray type of service is making sure it's secure. Yeah?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I don't have a horse in the race, but I have a whale in the race, and Shlomi has a frog in the race. So
we all have animals. So.
There are also animals. There are some animals in this race, and to your point, Alan, like it's been the dream of software development for decades, right? For multiple generations of pluggable or building blocks or Lego assembly. But we all 3 of us know that that promise has always been out of reach, right? We all remember Corba back in the day had a lot of promises around it, but how real pluggable and building blocks was it? What was actually pretty much a monolith at the end of the day. And I think containers, to your point, containers have finally brought on this world where everyone's standardized on the Docker OCI container, and it allows for building blocks to assemble your applications. But how do you do that securely in a way that gives assurance to the organization and gives assurance to the developer? And that's what this partnership is really doing, is saying, hey, yeah, it could be Wild West out there, but let's give you a secure end-to-end supply chain from source to the developer's laptop of quality content that you can assemble into a great application very quickly and with assurance. So it is the maturing, if you will, of the industry to help focus on productivity and secure applications.
Absolutely. So we talk about security. Shlomi, you don't know this, but we just announced about a half hour ago our DevOps Dozen Awards, and JFrog X-Ray won for Best Cloud Native Security. Woo. So congratulations on that. Yeah. So now you've got an award-winning security product there.
Thanks.
Guys, great. If you don't mind, though, let's talk a little bit. What has to take place behind the scenes for Docker Hub to talk to Artifactory, for it to be delivered via that mechanism in a secure manner? It's not just waving a wand and wishing. Let's talk. You're both fairly technical CEOs, so share with our audience. What's the magic there?
I think it's all start with the end in mind. Why this happened? Why did it happen? JFrog was founded in 2008, I think before the era of containers, and containers as Docker introduced it to the world.
Modern containers.
Sun Microsystems started the concept, but obviously Docker brought a game changer into the world of software. And if you start with the end in mind, you ask yourself, what happened? What happened in this decade? What needed to be replaced? And why it couldn't be stopped? Why this wave created a wave that changed completely the software landscape? The main answer is that developers need to be faster and they need to be more secure. Now, if you take this and you take it a leap forward, as we say in JFrog, then you need to go to the hub in order to get your images from, your Docker images from, and then you have to build, manage, and ship it internally. This is where you use the registry. The two pieces in the life cycle of the container is the hub and the registry. You use the hub in order to become faster and use open source images that were hosted there, and you use the registry in order to adapt it to what your organization needs, and you are 10,000 times faster than what it used to be before containers. So it's not a question of will container catch up or replace the world of software? It's already a fact. And if you don't follow this fact, you will fall behind, and your competitive advantage of accessing to your users you will probably lose it, and you will fall behind after the other players in the market. Now, when we thought about it, Docker and Jfrog, we came, like everything we do in both companies, we came from the developer's perspective. What will make your life easier? Not anymore the great company of the repository, the creator of Artifactory, or the great company of the containers, the creators of Docker. How can we together bring something that you will enjoy by using and will make you faster and more secure? And the one thing, obviously, is an easy onboarding between the registry and the hub. Not just from technology point of view, Artifactory and Docker forever work together, but also from business point of view. And not just from business point of view, but also to protect and to encourage your freedom of choice as developer. If you want to use the clouds, if you want to have it as a service, or you want to use a self-hosted. We were honored to learn from Scott and his team that Jfrog Artifactory is a very popular registry on the Docker Hub statistics. And we know that Docker is the #1 provider for containers and all the way to the client. So the coming together, both from native integration and from frictionless perspective on the business model, will make the developer's life easier. Now you sell bottom up. If you remove those bumps from the developer's life, they would become faster. And we go back to where it started. I need to be faster. I need to be efficient. And you guys go and figure out, Mr. Vendors, what you want to do, but make my life better. And I think this is the main motivation behind this partnership. And it's the first phase of the partnership.
Scott?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where when the users are right there in front of both companies, using both companies' products in anger, as the English might say, but clearly showing that there's value in both. It was easy for Jfrog and Docker to look at each other and say, that's great momentum. How do we do even better? How do we remove even more friction? How do we help developers go even faster? How do we help them move fast with security? Because often you have to trade off one of those for the other, right? Moving fast sometimes results in less security. Being secure sometimes means going slower. And Shlomi and I looked at each other and said, that's not a value proposition for developers. Let's focus on what they need, which is speed with security. And the users are already kind of voting with their activity and with their behavior. And we think this is just going to accelerate that even further.
Yep.
And if I may, Alan, adding one more sentence, and
Sure.
Obviously Scott and I are very aligned. Developers became the rainmakers of the industry. Everybody gets that now. If you are one of the giant clouds or a small startup, developers are the rainmaker. Those are the new persona in the enterprise software. So it's not just about two vendors that are building a great integration together. It's also taking a courage, bold move and say, we are not just going to give you a better technology, we are also going to give you a better offer. So you will have your infrastructure ready to be used, and you have a frictionless, unlimited usage on both sides. So you will remove all frictions and not just the technology and integration challenges.
Agreed. So from a nuts and bolts perspective, though, I'm a developer and I want to use some Docker Hub images. I want to bring them down and secure them using Artifactory. What does it work? I need an account on both platforms. Is the entire Docker Hub library available to me through Artifactory now like that? What about updates, changes? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it is, Alan. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it is. And now we've made that onboarding with accounts on both sides, just 2 clicks, right? And all of a sudden you have the fresh content that's being updated, being secured once it lands on Jfrog Artifactory, all automatically. This is the key, right? It's being done automatically for you as a developer. So once you select your image, the magic happens behind the scenes thanks to the integration of the products. And next thing you know, on Docker Desktop, you're consuming great content being fed to you by Jfrog Artifactory. You don't have to worry about provisioning anything. You don't have to worry about securing it because it's all being done for you. So again, removing friction is so developers can just focus on building great applications is the North Star, if you will, of this partnership.
Yeah, fully agree. And the self-hosted is, as Scott described, removing friction and making sure that in one click you have both environment available for you. In the cloud, you just expect whoever your vendor is, you expect him to make sure that everything is covered. Therefore, Docker and Jfrog collaborated to make sure that the Jfrog cloud users will have an easy, unlimited access to the hub.
Excellent. Now, both your companies have very strong open source heritage. What's the status here? Is this functionality available for free? Is it a paid thing? What's the status on that?
Well, so there's a couple different layers there. The core functionality of Docker is upstream open source, but the products have a free version. But once they enter a business, most businesses want the business features that they're willing to pay a modest subscription for. So that's kind of point one. Point two is the Docker official images, which is a really cornerstone of what the developers use to build out their applications. Those are based on upstream open source. And so what we've done with the hub is we have a process of curating that upstream open source, building them into packages that are easy for developers to consume and use. And then with this partnership, allowing for that secure distribution from hub through JFrog Artifactory to Docker Desktop. And so there is absolutely kind of open source DNA that runs through this. But obviously both Docker and JFrog are commercial businesses as well. And so we're finding the right balance there with this partnership.
My fault. I asked the wrong question. Let me be more direct. Does this functionality cost more money if I'm already a Docker Hub customer and a JFrog customer?
No.
That was the answer I was looking for. Okay, good. So Shlomi, you mentioned that this was just step one. And obviously, you're not going to talk about anything you're not allowed to talk about at this point. But, give us, you open the genie's bottle. Give us a peek inside. What else might we might be seeing here?
Well, first of all, one comment regarding the different subscriptions and the open source and the community. Both Docker and JFrog knows the community very well. And Docker built the greatest community ever. And I think if we have now 28 million developers on GitHub, I bet that the majority of them are using Docker. So that's not going to cost more than what they used to have. On the contrary, what we are trying to do is to make you faster and more efficient and secure using the same models without changing that. That's very important to understand. This is not one and one come together for a higher price, not at all.
That's right.
Regarding the genie bottle, and I love the phrase, Alan, thank you. We are very excited, very, very excited to collaborate with Docker. We know how much these two companies can do together. The technical team on both sides are blowing their minds with ideas of what happened, what is the image life cycle from the creation all the way to the to production and the deployment environment. Obviously, coming Swamp Up in Q2 and DockerCon in Q2, we will announce the next step, the next leap, or as Scott called it, V2. Currently, we are announcing the partnership and the easy onboarding, the easy integration between the registry and the hub. We are looking at different abilities of two platforms working together, like a better distribution, a better security, getting closer to the developer's machine, getting the full distribution and deployment automation ready, all kind of possibilities. It's a very big ocean, and we will work together. And one thing that I'm very proud and happy to see also in Docker, we are not creating a marketing fluff. Both companies are very loyal to the community. So as you see now, only after it was developed and improved in the product, only now we are announcing, and same thing will happen in the next phase. We will first work, the technical team will join forces. Once it's ready, we will announce and share it with the community. So I would just say, stay tuned. Scott, you probably want to add more.
Stay tuned is a good way to frame it. Watch this space, whether there's whales and frogs or whales and frogs together.
They're both in the water.
Both in the water.
But they're not fish. Guys, Shlomi, you mentioned Swamp Up. I think it's in June this year, right? People can get more information at jfrog.com, or is there a Swamp Up website?
There is a Swamp Up website, and we are now building the agenda. The call for paper is open. The community is reacting.
What's the website? Work with me here, Shlomi.
Search for Swamp Up, Jfrog Swamp Up.
Go to jfrog.com and look up for Swamp Up.
Thank you.
Scott, you're welcome.
Got me in problem with my CMO now, Alan.
You got issues. Nah, tell him I said it's okay. Scott, what about DockerCon? When's that scheduled, and where can people go get info?
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, DockerCon 2020 last year brought together 80,000 of the developer community that were using Docker and using JFrog, and it was a wonderful virtual event. 24 hours of Docker captains and community sharing great developer patterns and how to use these products together to ship great applications. So we're looking forward to a similar sort of outcome this year. It's going to be May 27th. And the registration is open at docker.com/DockerCon, one word, lowercase.
Excellent, Scott. JFrog CMO is going to make Shlomi watch what you said.
I'm angry. I'm going to register just now to DockerCon because of this information. We will make.
You should register for both.
We will register for both.
We will make sure that. It's not just about the conference. It's also about the content. And Q2 Swamp Up happens on June, the beginning of June. We are doing it virtual. Unfortunately, I have to say again, virtual like last year. It will be in 4 different time zones. But what we are now focusing on is the call for paper and the content. Yeah. And how we can bring value to developers, and I'm very honored to have Docker involved in it as well.
Fantastic. Guys, let me just say congratulations, to both of you and to both the organizations. This is a great matchup, right? A great partnership. The real winner here is the developer. That's right. And that's always, and the community. And that's a great thing. Right?
That's right.
So congratulations to both of you, man. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire about this. I expect V2, as someone said here. It's not a good thing to tell me about V2. But anyway, but I'll expect V2 coming up in just a couple of months, right?
Alan, first of all, the answer is yes, as we said, by the end of May and before Swamp Up and DockerCon, we will come up with more news. But there is one thing that gives you a sign about a good partnership. You don't have to explain it. It's obvious to all developers why these two companies should have worked together from day one. So we are very excited to leap forward.
Good stuff. Scott Johnston, Docker, Shlomi Ben Chaim, JFrog. Thank you for coming on and breaking this news with us today. We look forward to having you both on. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and Media Ops CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, next up is part 2 of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones, who's one of the founders of the Anonymous Hacktivist Group. Mike has some great guests. As I mentioned, this is part 2. Part 1 played on yesterday's TechStrong TV, and you can catch it at techstrong.tv, or you can watch all of the episodes of it at digitalanarchist.com. This is part 2, and part 3 will follow later this week. So now let's go to The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones.
So this is a question I want to ask you two guys. As far as your backgrounds go, right? How did your family approach or try to understand or react to what you did, right? So I know my family, we're very disconnected in multiple ways. They don't agree with what I do. And back then they looked at it as, do you really want to do this? You're going to get in trouble. And, when they started getting letters about downloading copyrighted material and just bullshit, it's like, they put me in a different situation than, let's say, my sibling. And that, I don't think they'll ever really understand what I do. And so, like I said, we're disconnected. So how did your families react to your path to where you're at now? And how are they involved with you today?
You want to go ahead, Ghost?
Sure. Well, if you listen to my Darknet Diaries podcast, you kind of understand that, where my background comes from. A lot of my family are very, zealous, religious wise. And I mean, I'm religious too, but on a different kind of note than my family. My mom seems to think that Ghost Exodus, this persona of mine, is like a demon, driving me. I now understand a little better what it is, because if you've seen my Twitter feed, this is, I do have multiple personalities. It comes out, and you don't know all of it, but I do, and that's good enough for all of us.
Right.
But I don't let my family really know. For example, this is, if there's ever a, if my mom's business undergoes some type of cyber attack, I'm usually the first suspect on the list. In fact, in 2011, when I went to prison, I was sentenced and went to prison, her business got hacked into, and she immediately assumed it was me and threatened to call the FBI right off the bat. So I don't tell them anything anymore, ever.
Exactly.
I'm happy with that.
Exactly.
I love them, but this is it.
What about you, Johnny?
I remember, I think I told you this story. I showed up on, my brother, he works in construction. And this was just after, I think, payback or something like that. Yeah. And I showed up on his job site, and I'm like, let me borrow a hammer. And he was like, why? And I was like, just give me a fucking hammer, And so I put a couple hard drives on the ground. I smashed the shit out of them and threw them in this fucking container. And he was like, what the fuck? He was like, what are you doing, bro? I'm like, nah, never mind, man. I was like, you don't even know the half of it, But later on down the road, I kind of told him what the story was and shit. And he was like, you mean he's like, those guys with the masks on the fucking news? I'm like, yeah. He's like, no shit. I was like, it's even deeper than that if you know. He's like, bro, he's like, just don't get in trouble. But my family, like Exodus, they're small. They were very traditional. My mother's Sicilian. So that they probably, even if I explained it to them, they probably wouldn't know what the fuck I was talking about, honestly.
Yeah, so when I was being investigated by the FBI, I took a thumb drive over to my dad's house. And I said, you have got to lock up this thumb drive in your safe. If something happens to me, this thumb drive has all the information to it. That thumb drive ended up becoming like a FIPS 140 USB with encryption. And I dumped it not too long ago. But the biggest thing for me, right? So it's funny, like, so Ghost, your handle and my handle kind of reflect each other, like the Haunted. And I think we kind of have the same thought when it comes to our personalities, right? So there's a level of secrecy, and there's a level of things that kind of control who we are that comes out every once in a while, and it's hard to control that. And there's that dark level that, you know, when I see something on TV or I see somebody being mistreated, that haunting or that darkness comes out. And, you know, if you get in the way of that, if you get in the way of that, it's bad news. But yeah,
I think that's something we all had, though, you know, because I think we were all motivated by world events. You know, for me, especially, I mean, and people that know me know, you know, if I got involved, you know, this fucking, it was going down, whatever it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, the secrecy. So that's another thing I want to touch on. So as hackers and you know, being involved with different groups and working in the shadows and kind of like not trusting people around you. I find that bleeds off into like my personal life sometimes, where I go back to that mode of thinking of, do I really trust this person? Can I tell them everything about me? Do I want to expose myself like that? And I think that goes back to my days in Anonymous, where we had to worry about CIs, we had to worry about plants, we had to worry about just crazy shit, and FBI sitting outside of our door. And what people don't understand is what you see in the movies, right? The FBI like sitting outside and like making it evident that they're there. That shit's for real. Like that I'm sure everybody can attest to that. Like they make themselves evident that, you know, hey, we're here.
I remember one time I was on Twitter, and this is funny. You know, I forgot what I did, but somebody fucking kept trying to tag the DOD and the fucking FBI and everybody on my thread, you know, to say I was the DNC hacker. I'm like, don't even fucking go there, man. I'm like, kept staring at my door, like, oh no. I'm like, it's coming, you know. And it never came, but it's still, you know, shit like that. You know, people try to, you know, get even with you, you know, because they don't like you. And,
yeah, there's actually a guy in here earlier. His handle was Van Man, and when I saw that, it took me back to the days of old.
Yeah,
being banned.
Right.
So, like, Exodus, talk to me about the level of paranoia during your investigation, because I know what mine was like.
Well, it's difficult for me to articulate this because I initially wasn't paranoid, because I knew they were listening to my jail phone calls and knew that they were screening my mail, but I did not give two fucks. That was just my mindset at the time. The paranoia came after all these experiences had accumulated, and I'd done my time, and I left prison. But you see, like, I knew what they were capable of based on my experiences with them and where their limitations lie. And so, like, if I wanted to get messages out to my contact in the ETA, I would write it on a piece of rice paper in tiny print and fold it up into a little square and stick it beneath the stamp on the envelope, or I would take a 5x7, or a 4x7, photograph and pull it apart and hide it inside and glue it back together with the adhesive on an envelope and mail them out that way to get messages. And they never caught those messages, but I to be honest with you, I didn't experience the paranoia until I entered the realm of the unknown, which was, I'm out of prison. Are they still watching me?
Yeah, that's the hardest part, right? So after the investigation, and I got back to the U.S. like 3 or 4 months ago, it's like, I'm always looking on my shoulder, like, who's, monitoring or who's joining our podcast or who's adding me on Twitter. Because it's like, I don't trust anybody. And literally, there's been a few people who've experienced that distrust, right? So they join us or whatever, and I do full on onslaught of OSINT. I'll be like, I know this, I know this, I know this. Who are you? And they're like, I don't pose a threat. And I'm like, yeah, but everybody poses a threat at a certain level, But you have to be like uber vigilant, and people don't understand that. Like, just as like normal everyday citizens have to worry about, getting their bank accounts broken into or whatever, our level's a little bit different, where we know people are watching, and we know people listen, and we know that they just wait for a moment that they can take advantage. And it sounds completely insane and paranoid, but you're not paranoid if you know that people are listening and you can prove it.
Right. They're listening.
Especially go ahead, Exis.
Both. All right. You know that I went on the run twice. Like, I was fugitive status twice.
That shit was epic, by the way.
Both times. You have no freaking idea, dude. Both times I was totally not paranoid. Like, my friend and I penetrated, customs and border security in broad daylight at Dade Island in Miami. Like, cameras are all over the place. We're walking down freaking train tracks. We're walking right past like guarded checkpoints. And like, I'm knowing at some point I'm going to get arrested, but I don't care when. Just let me get past this checkpoint. But, Dade Island is completely like crawling with law enforcement. But this was exciting. Like, it was a thrill. Comparing that to, post prison has the worst paranoia possible.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah, I think it's the fear of going back through the same bullshit that we've been through. My journey is nothing like yours, right? So I didn't have to do prison time, but being a prisoner in your own home and being rejected in your own country is really fucked. Like, I can't explain that feeling of, when you go to get on a plane or try to get a passport, and they said, no, your shit's been revoked. Dude, you're in another country. Like, that shit's real. But tell them where you were trying to go, because that shit's fucking epic too.
All right, look.
Let me go.
Should go again?
Here comes. Get ready. Okay, this doesn't make a lot of sense, but in my head it does. So I needed to get to Israel, and I didn't want to fly there because.
But why? Why'd you have to go to Israel?
Because I wanted to. I just wanted to. I've always wanted an Israeli, citizenship, and I didn't at the time. I didn't want to go through an Orthodox conversion because they're really picky, and if I flew there directly, they have the right to send you back if they think you're there for religious purposes. And my friend and I were there for religious purposes. And so we did a little research, right? And we discovered that the easiest way to leave the country is by cargo ship. Like, this is the way to do it. So we found the right company. It's the CMA-CGM. They're the biggest freight shipping company in the world, and they're super dirty. Like they've been busted for illegal trafficking of ivory and weapons to Russia, and a disassembled tank to North Korea. It's like, these are our guys, dude. Totally. Not only that, but we found out, check this out. We found out that this particular ship that we were tracking disabled their AIS tracking system.
Beacon. Yeah, the beacon.
So we know, hey, they're doing something illegal. They're not going to have a problem at all. And so that's when we kind of, I hate to use the word break in because it's like there's a locked door, but when there's that many cops present in broad daylight and you walk right through the middle of a gauntlet of cops, like that's kind of like breaking in. So we broke in, and it got to the point where there was even a shipyard worker who picked us up and took us to the ship we wanted to get to. So traveling to where we needed to go, like this was an English ship, yes, headed for Spain, but ain't nobody going to where we're going. So we had to go through Nigeria. So we're going to Nigeria, okay? And we're like, hey, we got some friends in Nigeria, and none of them are scammers. And so we convinced the captain of this ship to take us to Nigeria. He had no problem. And I told him we were privy to the fact that they had disabled their AIS tracking beacon. And let's see, I spoke with an Israeli accent. So I posed as an American Israeli and trying to look like I probably didn't even belong here at all. Just take us where we needed to go and we'll cut you in a deal for ivory. And they said yes.
Nice.
Except that we didn't have $1,200 ahead, and so we were waiting for the next ship. But it was about money to them. So
that shit was epic. When I heard that story, when you told me that story, I was like, "Dude, that is so awesome!" Like, I have never thought about cargo ships, although I thought about yachting and personal like private jets and shit, but never cargo ships. But that's pretty epic, man. That's creative.
It was fun.
But so there's another part of your story that really caught my attention too, is the state park system. That shit was so awesome. When you told me about the drones, dude, you have to tell that. You have to say it.
All right. So the second time I went on the run, so the prison gave me like $50 or something, just, for taxi fares and bus travel. So I take the $50 and run or whatever. And my first stage is Cedar Hill State Park. And I stayed there for a week. I didn't have anything other than my clothes and some food that I brought from prison and a trash bag to cover my stuff up when it rained. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. I almost gave up at that point. But the Cedar Hills, I alluded to my wife at the time, who I'm not a wife anymore, that I was near a large body of water. Well, there's only one place where that is, and that's Cedar Hill State Park. She told my mother, who told my PO, and my PO told state park officials. And so they were looking for me for the better part of a week with a fucking drone. Like, listen, man, like, those whines, those buzzy ass whines, those drones flying overhead for hours, just for about a week looking for me. I have never been so freaking scared in my life, because back in my day, we didn't have drones. We had remote control airplanes and helicopters. So now we've got drones, and they were looking for me. Excuse me. And I knocked over my little wooden hut with my little reed mattress. I just covered it all up, and I ran into the forest and hid and stayed in there for a little while. I'm telling you, that had me bugged out.
Yeah, man. Like, so when you told me about that shit, I was like trying to envision it in my head, like what would it be like to be hiding in the woods from a drone. But while you were in prison, so like we developed like new tools, right, to knock drones out of the sky with RF and 2.4 gigahertz and shit. So I'm envisioning that story going, okay, I can sit with the Yagi antenna and just drop their shit one at a time. But yeah, dude, your story is amazing. Like, yeah, I've heard a lot of different stories. I've been involved with different people that have, gone down, the path of prison or whatever and been on the run. But your shit is so creative, dude. Like, your brain mimics the way that I would think. It's amazing. But yeah, like, so looking at now and how much they can track us, right? So a lot of CIA tools are released to the public. You look at Weeping Angel, how they hacked into smart TVs and activated microphones and cameras but they have to have physical access with USB. And a lot of this is being leaked. So you get like a really good picture of the type of surveillance that the government does. And when I was telling people that, I know they're on my internet, I know they're on my home connection, because they're repeating shit that only I would say to somebody else in another country. And how is it when I show up to an FBI meeting and they bring a translator for Russian if they didn't know I was already communicating with Russians? And so, I was talking to my mom not too long ago, and she's like, do you remember the phone calls you were making to Russia? And I'm like, yeah, was that not like a red flag? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to say, I wonder why my son is like communicating from Midwest, America to Moscow.
Expensive phone call.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sort of. We won't go into that. But yeah, so I mean, like, we're built to survive, right? Whether it be on the internet, whether it be in person, we have that mindset to like kick on the creativeness and figure out how to get by. And that's one thing that I went through in the UK was, what do I do? I don't have a passport. I can't work. I got to find a way to live, right? So I started public speaking, and I had a family over there that really looked after me. A Vietnamese family that they're basically like my family. I look at them like my parents. But you learn how to get by, and you learn how to continue doing what you're doing, and it doesn't stop you, right? And then once everything's said and done, you have just that much more experience to pass on to the next guy, right? But yeah, so from here, like from the time I started this group or this podcast, it was a podcast built over a glass of bourbon, and me and my roommate, Nomad, was like, maybe we should do a podcast. Sounds kind of cool. Let's try it out. I totally expected not to succeed. I totally expected to completely fail. Nobody logged in, but that's my mindset. I'm always like my worst critic, right? And then it seemed like a lot of people with the same ideas and principles kind of like came together. But what kills me is like, so Johnny 5 shows up. Johnny 5 shows up, then Exodus shows up. Exodus shows up, and then all of a sudden Alberto shows up. And it's like, it's that whole like, I guess, tension on the internet, and people just want to belong to something to give back, not only to give back, but to find people that their tribe. And that's what I consider this is like, when you look at different groups on the internet, we've always found our tribe, people that were like us. And that's how we roll. And then people just tend to follow that, but it's kind of scary, right? So, you start building friendships, and all of a sudden those friendships become like a community. And I'll be honest with you, like there's been times this week where I get so frustrated because I have so many people pulling me different directions, where I literally told a company in Germany that, hey, look, I can't do this. You guys are way too much. Call me at 6 a.m. Done. But I think it's important to like spread like the idea and help people and like really, get that knowledge trickled down to even like the kids level, because there are kids nowadays, 11 years old, 10 years old, that can do shit that we couldn't do 10 years ago. And it's fucking amazing. So yeah, we donate a lot of money and time to those kids. Like we had one on here that's like 11 years old, and we bought him some server time and some equipment and shit. But that's kind of what we're about now. Although I have my own ideas as to where this will probably end up. And I'm probably sure that you guys do too. But we'll just have to see.
Made a good point. Like you don't have to, steal money to be elite. I can assure you, I never took a nickel, but I was a force to be reckoned with. There was no talk about it. I mean, but
dude, so money doesn't mean anything, right?
It didn't drive me. Yeah.
No, if you don't have the money, it doesn't matter, because it's the knowledge that's worth money. That's where the real power is at, is the knowledge. And if we can take what we know, so I post like tons of videos on YouTube. I've made a commitment to at least post a video a day of a walkthrough of some sort of hack, no matter how basic or how advanced. Put that shit out there and share that knowledge, because the government right now is like trying to shut that shit down. YouTube, oh my God, I've so battled with YouTube over the past week. I'll post a video, and if I say crack in the description, shit gets shut down. I'm like, are you serious? Like I can't like do like security walkthroughs because you consider it a threat.
It's a fucking algorithm now, That's why I told you name it Kung Fu, remember?
Yeah. So I did, and it passed. But it's the whole thing about censorship, right? The government doesn't want people to spread knowledge and give people the ability that we have. And they're afraid of that. People are always afraid of
threat without the knowledge.
What's that?
How do you stop a threat without that knowledge?
How are we a threat without the knowledge?
But how can you stop bad actors without that knowledge? You can't,
right? So most of the companies I've been hired to is because I have knowledge of offensive and defensive. You can't be a defensive position within a company for security if you don't know what the hell is going on. If you look at an IDS and say, oh, well, it looks like, there's shellcode going across. Well, what created that alert and why did it happen? How do you stop it? They don't know how it's created. They don't know the attack, so they don't know what to do about it. So they freeze up and they're like, oh shit, we're screwed. But you need people like us that can be like, yo, I know that attack. I know that shellcode. I know that signature, and this is how you do it, and this is how you stop it.
Yeah, just watching traffic isn't like that's like you were saying, man. I mean, if all you're relying on is like seam tools or something like that, like you're not going to stop me, man.
No. And I can throw up so many decoys. So I attacked this one place back when I was doing nefarious shit, and I threw in a bunch of decoys, right, of their own internal network. They were blocking their own shit for like 2 hours, like shutting their own network down. And I was watching it like live. I was like, are you really serious? Like, you don't understand like decoy attacks? Like, but there's a lot of companies who don't, because they hire people who can pass a background check, who can get a security clearance, and that's all they know. They know what they're taught. That's it.
I'd be surprised if I got a security clearance.
I will never get another security clearance. I don't think they would even let me to take the polygraph.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I can pass it.
So with that being said, I'm going to open up questions for everybody. If you want to put it in the chat for me, Exodus, or Johnny 5, feel free. And I'll let Ryan moderate the questions as far as, who gets what.
Let's open up. Any questions? Stunning silence. Inquisitive bunch, aren't you? Come on, guys.
It's always silent at first, and then somebody breaks the ice. But also, after we get done with the Q&A, I'm going to walk through some basic like Wi-Fi hacking shit. I don't know, Johnny 5, do you have like, did you put together anything for Hashcat or whatever?
I've seen you do a video, so I didn't even bother.
Okay, I'm going to play it. I'm going to share the video and play it, and walk people through it.
Why don't we run through that while people get some questions together, Mike?
Yeah. Let me bring it up really quick. There's a question for Johnny.
What's that?
Do you see the question, Johnny, or do you want me to ask it?
I'm far away.
Didn't you help with a group on digging into FaceApp, the digging of FaceApp?
I work with a group called Anti-Info, and we went after, everybody. Gab was one of them. FaceApp, yes. So I always made that joke too, because Gab only followed like 102 people, right? And I was one of them, and it was just to keep track of my ass and to make sure I wasn't fucking their shit up. Because when they first launched, we just wasn't a sense of like censorship or anything like that. What it was for me, at least, was, I understand you want people there to have free speech and stuff like that, but when it spills into the street, like blood-wise, we had issue with that. Anonymous and other groups, were, in my view, the great equalizer. We didn't care what your political party was or, what you were about.
We were your political party.
Right.
Hey, so what advice would you give to a youngsters like tempted to go down the route of doing, down the illegal route, no pun intended?
I would say if your curiosity gets the best of you, that's what it was for me. I believed in what I was doing was right. And not only that, my black hat days, I would say, where I was, throwing around malware and stuff like that, even still, all I did was, if anything, open the command prompt 30 times, so I never really intended to like destroy shit. Some of the issues I have, so I would give the advice of the old hacker mentality. We never attacked hospitals. you know, we didn't lick up schools or anything like that, you know, so I would just suggest, you know, whichever route you go, just, you know, just keep your head level, you know, don't do nothing stupid that, you know, is going to hurt somebody, you know, because it's just not worth it. You know, you end up going to jail for something retarded, and it's just not how real hackers think, you know.
Yeah.
Since your return to normality, how have you acclimatized to new tech and hacking methodologies?
Oh, man.
Oh, let me take a look. It's been slow for me, mainly because of my demanding work schedule. My main thing was just getting back on Linux and just trying to be a functional user at Linux, and that's over and done with. For me, it's been a lack of time because I'm coming out of prison. It's only been a year now, from the ground up, with no help and no resources that I have been aware of. So everything that I've been learning has been from my friends. Wireless penetration is different nowadays than it was for me back then, because back then we weren't contending against encrypted HTTPS, so data packets were in a readable format back then. And most people, the industry standard was WEP. Nobody uses that anymore. Nobody uses WEP. And you know, Metasploit has made some changes. It's not really different, but I've been learning a little bit more about that. My main thing, my sole focus right now is blind cross-site script injection. So that's what I'm focusing all my energy on right now, and literally nothing else.
So what else we got? Hey, Johnny.
Yeah.
Are you ready to go, Mike?
No, go ahead. Answer those questions, and I'll start the video here in a minute.
Yeah, I see one in there for that.
Sean Van wants to know what you're doing now for employment. How do you keep yourself busy?
So during last year, when I made the decision to walk away from, like, you know, activism and stuff like that, you know, I run a few websites and stuff like that. So, you know, in the beginning of the year, you know, I started doing contracts and working with a couple of firms that work in cybersecurity, and they would hire me, you know, basically as a black hat, gray hat hacker. You know, they didn't give a shit. And that was for government level entities and stuff like that. So, you know, it was basically like slam the door, give me a report. So that's what I've been trying to focus on. You know, post hacktivism and hacking. I look to move more forward into InfoSec and stay in the industry. You know, I worked in more of a blue team role when I was an IT manager. So, you know, it's been a little bit of a transition for me, because people always ask me, you know, like, why haven't you, like, you know, got so far in? It's like, all right, like, I already live a double life. Like, I couldn't live a triple life, right? So I just feel like, you know, now is the time, and you know, I got in my mid 30s, and you just kind of feel like, man, I'm old now, you know, like, let the kids take care of it. You know, I'm gonna go be you know, what they call an old fag, right?
So there's another question too about, you know, what about your past keeps you up at night? And I can honestly say that 100% of it keeps me up at night. Trying to figure out what's happening tomorrow, who's working for who, why are people approaching me in a certain way. It gives you a different outlook on people and the world in general. Because I don't think that people understand the level of, like, psyops the FBI and different investigators do. Like, they really fuck with your head, and it takes you a very long time to get past that shit. So I still have dreams or thoughts about what happened before and what's going on now, and if I can trust so-and-so or people's motivations. So I know that's probably the same for Patrick and Exodus.
Yeah, I literally came up in the hacking community with a zero trust level. I was lucky to have the same hacker handle like the next week. And then I think that's part of how I was successful in lasting as long as I did. Johnny Five just kind of stuck, and I noticed that over the last few years. I was thinking to myself, like, I was talking to a friend, and she mentioned, she was like, maybe you should walk when you still can walk. I'm like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. What about you, Exodus?
Yeah, go
ahead. I always repeat this mantra. It's not my fight anymore. It's not my fight anymore. And somehow I still get sucked up into it. I have friends who will get hit by a scammer, and I'll find out who that scammer is. Yeah. And I keep telling myself, like, there's a new generation now. I don't have anything to do with this. But I always find some way to get sucked back up. I can't let it go sometimes.
Yeah, me too. Wayne asks, what is your view of the dark web? Opportunity, threat, or both? I think it depends on which way you look at it, right? So I kind of wear a gray hat, kind of dance between white and black, and I try not to do anything illegal, but it's both. It provides me, a place to work because I do intelligence, makes me money, but it's also a threat because more time I spend there. And I'm sure that Johnny Five and Exodus can agree that there's always that fine line of temptation where at any one point you could be like, you could flip that switch. That switch is always there. And it's like, I can't even explain it. Normal people, I don't think, would understand it. But it's always that temptation of, do I go back to doing what I was doing because I'm comfortable with it and it's who I am? Or do I play along and contain myself?
I don't know, man. Like, it's hard to explain, like, computer hacking to people. Like, I try to show people, like, what I do, and stuff like that on my laptop. And, like, they don't even, like, get, like, how I'm able to, like, hack into shit, and, like, I never touch a graphical interface, so everything's through the command line. And and they're looking at it like, what the fuck are you even doing? And then I'll, like, show them the website, like, look, like, I'll deface it and then I'll show you, and they're like, oh, you really defaced that? And I was like, yeah. Like, all I did was replace an index file.
I'm a little bit different when it comes to that because I see the opportunity. Like, so I'll scan a whole entire country's net block and find all the shit, right? Like Syria, when I found their atomic energy email, looking at that and going, I know that I can get in there. I know that I can get some really good info, but how much time is it going to take? By the time I get in there, will they knock on my door and throw me in a black van? So it's those things that you have to weigh out. But to be honest with you, it's one of those things that really, like, grips me inside. Like, I have to, like, really fight that shit.
It's curiosity kills the cat.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Interpol.
9 lives.
Yeah, I've used up 9.5. I don't know how many I have left.
About 7 of mine gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's that temptation. That temptation is always there. Just like with anybody, like normal people, right? The temptation of doing something wrong is always there. But it's how you look at it and the way you look back. Right. So there's times where I really hate the government and I really want to go do what I did before. But then I realize what I went through and do I really want to go through that shit again? It was brutal.
It's kind of vague, because it's like
it's a hefty price to pay.
We fucking smacked up the government, but it's like on the other sense, it's like, okay, well, why are we doing that then? You know what I mean? They never look at the why. They're just like, oh, well, you're fucking up our website. And it's just like, okay, well, why? Let's look at that.
So in answer to Sean Van, he was asking about giving the podcast some airtime. Absolutely, you can advertise this on LinkedIn. It'll be on TechStrong TV as well. One other thing. So Michael Finley says normal people only know GUI. Well, then I guess I'm an alien because I never did GUI interfaces. People getting into the industry and, like, trying to learn security tools, you'll learn really quick that, okay, pull up Wireshark GUI and see how fast it crashes as opposed to running TCP dump from command line. Perfect example.
With TCP dump, you could just write into a text file and cat it out and see what happens. It's so easy for hackers to do that, whereas everybody's trying to, use something that they're comfortable and colorful, That's what you got to stay away from.
So Kristen's asking about mental health aspects of all of what we go through. That's a brutal one, right? So our industry already has mental health issues. Like I just recently lost a friend to suicide in Austin, who I literally talked to him a week before he took his life, and there was no indications whatsoever. But again, just like the name haunted hacker and ghost or whatever, there's things we all battle with on a personal level that I would say like 90% of us that do what we do have a hard time communicating that part of our psyche to people. We tend to keep that kind of closed off and deal with it on our own level. I talked to Chris Roberts not too long ago about the same issue. We had the guy who committed suicide was a mutual friend. And it's weird because like a lot of us have like really high IQs and we, we're very intelligent.
Was it 197?
Yeah. But we have like a really difficult issue, like communicating on, I guess, an emotional human level. So we've lost a lot of people like Aaron Swartz. That was a huge loss to our industry. Like that was big. And there's several others. But when you get to a certain level where, especially like when you've gone through investigations, when you've been pressured by law enforcement or government, there's a certain amount of information you don't tell anybody. And that's kind of internal, and you fight with that every day.
I think the way I battled that was, it's like you said, it's very hard for computer hackers because another thing that pushed me away to get out of hacktivism was the mental health aspect of it. You get so lost up in what you're doing, and while whatever you think and believe in whatever you're doing, you end up spending every day, you go to work and then you come home and then that's the first thing you do. You're logging into IRC channels and you're talking to your friends, and then you're trying to get after targets, and that's your life, and then before you know it, you're just like, shit, like I'm 36. Like what the fuck happened? Like maybe I should go like travel or something. Like
36.
Yeah.
I wish I was 36 again. But yeah, like, so, and that brings up another point. I know it's not a question, but being pulled in different directions, right? So that's one of my frustrations. Like, I don't know how to like say no, because I want to like help everybody. I want to like, fulfill whatever they want. But dude, like sometimes I have to sit back and go, where am I in all this shit? Like, do I get my time? Do I get what I want? Or am I just like, I like punish myself because of what happened and like feel like I have to do shit for everybody. And that's a very fine line. That's a huge fine line.
Yeah, it's rough for people who go through mental health. Like that's something that like I was always a big advocate of that. Even when I was a hacktivist, I would retweet it all the time because it just, people have to realize that, when you isolate yourself like that and you get into hacktivism, hacking, it can be problematic.
Well, and not only that, but people like us that have, an ability that most people don't have, and our brains work differently. We spend a lot of time in our head. I think I could probably speak for most of us is that we spend probably 90% in our head. Whether working out problems or fighting demons. And when people say, what's on your mind? I'm like, fuck, how much time you got? Where do I start?
I know, right? Where's my chair?
Yeah, exactly. So another question earlier, what am I drinking? So my go-to drink is Fireball, Evan Williams, and a Cinnamon Jolly Rancher. So that's my go-to. Yeah.
I was going to get some liquor, but...
Be right back.
All right, man. We got you. So Sean Van says, your stories are incredible. Would love to see all you regain your place in society. I'm doing my part to ensure healthcare embraces your skills. So healthcare is really important. They're a major target right now, especially with the pandemic.
That shit, I never tolerated that as a hacker. Like, that's not how we roll, man.
I think the first confirmed death or kill was last year with healthcare. Attacker hit a hospital, shut down their systems, and someone on life support died. So that was like the first confirmed hacking kill, direct kill from a compromise.
Oh man, I couldn't imagine that when I was like 16 years old, but we just didn't see it that way. That's not.
So I have an embedded medical device in my chest that really like keeps me alive. And getting the company Medtronic to understand that I don't want Bluetooth enabled on my pacemaker was like a fucking nightmare. They were like, well, we need to communicate. And I'm like, no, we don't need to communicate. Like, as long as this shit is doing its job, I don't need anybody getting access to my pacemaker in my chest. Like, no, thank you. But I think the more that we progress as society and science, more of these life-changing devices are going to be implanted. And dude, it's not a good outlook when you look at like the state of hacking.
I think that hackers like us, and stuff like that. There was this Cyber 19 community or something. I think, what is it? Mr. Reboot Dan or something.
Daniel Card. Daniel Card is a good friend.
Yeah. Dan Card. Yeah. And I knew him as a hacktivist, but he sees me on Twitter now, and I have a personal profile. He's like, who the fuck is this guy?
Good
but
dude.
He knew the other Johnny Five. He knew who the fuck I was.
So. Kaylee asked about Elon Musk's Neuralink, since we're talking about medical devices. Neuralink, right? I don't think it's what it is supposed to be. I think he put that shit together to make money for SpaceX. I don't think Neuralink will ever be a thing. The military worked with RFID and sensors in the uniforms to look at body temperature, heart rate, stuff like that, to report back to see which troop is having a hard time, or like maybe on the brink of dying or whatever. But Neuralink can be really ethically dangerous. If that happens, if it gets put into play, hackers around the world are going to be blowing shit up, because Neuralink is like really dangerous. And I think we're on the, So I think we're on the edge of like some really scary shit as far as like robots, AI, machine learning. Me and Nomad watched a video on a robot from Boston Electronic, I think it was, where they were like teaching these robots to like walk and stabilize. And some of it was like Hollywood, but it made you think, like, you look back to the Matrix and the machines taking over and whatever. You combine AI with some of this, robotics, it's going to get bad.
Well, that's what is going to make hackers more resourceful, right? I mean, what fucking movie that you ever seen about the end of days where a hacker doesn't come in and, what is it? Independence Day, shit like that,
well, like that one Bruce Willis, when they brought in the hacker to like help out with the SCADA shit. I mean, that's for real. That's legit.
Yeah. Matthew Farrell, man. Everybody knows Matthew.
From the Apple commercials.
I know. What was that song by Flyleaf and shit that I always listen to? I thought that was cool, because I'm like, they even had him listening to hacker music when they fucking showed that. It was pretty funny.
All right, so I'm going to break away and put on this video. I posted the link to the video. There's some background noise. I don't know who's not muted, but
not me.
It's okay, Exodus. I got it. Yeah, so I'm going to go over. I posted the link on the chat for the Kung Fu WPA2. Let me back this up a little bit. If you guys want to bring it up, and I'm going to share my screen. We'll try that.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, we'll try that and see if it works. I'm going to stop that share and start another one.
We're going to do something from the DevOps experience with Russ Savage. Russ is going to be talking DevOps monitoring, and he's going to give us 5-step guide to monitoring Nirvana. Of course, some people call it observability, but to each his own. Anyway, here's Russ Savage back from DevOps experience, our something old today.
Hi, thanks for joining me today. My name is Russ Savage, and today we're going to talk about DevOps monitoring and taking it to the next level. So we're going to walk through a 5-step guide to bringing your observability and monitoring to a new level of Nirvana that you've never seen before. So just a quick background about myself. As I mentioned, I'm Russ Savage. I'm a product manager here at Influx Data. And today we're going to talk about 5 steps to monitoring Nirvana, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how Influx Data, the company, can help you achieve that Nirvana. I'll also provide some customer examples, and then time for any questions at the end. So just a quick background about Influx Data. So we were founded in 2013, and we're based in San Francisco. We're based remotely now, but we'll be back in San Francisco when this is all over. Our mission is really to deliver the best open source platform for time series data. So we focus on building a purpose-built time series data platform to really help you accelerate your development and accelerate your monitoring experience. So we've seen awesome traction. We've got over 228,000 unique active deployments of our open source instance, 500 plus customers, some really big names out there. And really focused on an open source distribution model with some closed source components, as well as a distributed cloud offering. So let's jump into some of the massive changes that we see in the technology landscape. And again, if you've experienced any of these, hopefully over the past couple of years, these are things that we're seeing in the industry and we're seeing with our customers. And really kind of break down into 3 different pieces. One of the big trends is we've seen monolithic applications move to more microservice-based architectures. And so where you used to have one single application running at on a large machine or a large set of machines, you start moving to smaller microservices all communicating with each other in real time. And so the amount of communication is increased, and the amount of information about those different systems has also increased. So instead of looking at CPUs and memory and infrastructure for a single application, you've got tens or probably hundreds of microservices running at a time that you need that information for. You've got an infrastructure that's moved from this notion of mainframes and physical hardware to more of these virtual machines and more containers. You see that in the cloud architectures that you're used to, where instead of looking at dedicated machines, a lot of times you're looking at just instances of a particular container. Also, with the rise of Kubernetes, everything is based on containers and pods, and so you start looking less at the physical machines that you're interested in, and more at the container level architecture. And these containers can come and go. Sometimes they only stick around for a few minutes, and so again, just increasing the amount of data that you need to look at and you need to analyze in order to get the visibility that you need. And then the third trend that we've seen is really an explosion of IoT sensors. I feel like every year they say it's the year of IoT, but we've definitely seen a massive increase in the amount of sensors and individual devices out there. If you look at kind of at a high level, moving from DevOps to an IoT use case, DevOps with laptops and data centers and physical hardware. You start going into wearables or sensors out in the field, sensors on oil rigs. And so you've actually got information from thousands of different devices, all giving you information about a single physical object or a single physical process. So again, this explosion of IoT sensors is only going to accelerate as we all kind of incorporate those sensors into our daily lives. So as we see those three trends, we start identifying challenges that our customers continue to face when they're looking out in the industry. So one, there's a ton of different monitoring solutions, and usually when you're buying a large system or you're working with a large platform, they probably already have a custom monitoring solution built in, but it's really specific to that solution, and it's hard to expose those metrics to a common platform or a common layer that you can analyze across all of them. And so you've got multiple monitoring solutions across your infrastructure, all with slightly different ways to access data, all with slightly different languages to analyze that data, and sometimes even different visualizations. So so you've got existing solutions that are able to create aggregations. You've got existing solutions that have really limited data retention policies. Sometimes you're only able to keep data for a couple of hours or a couple of weeks. It's like as I mentioned before, the metrics are locked down in a proprietary system that you need to understand and have access to in order to use. And then you start looking at, the reason when you've got all of these data in these different silos, trying to do any sort of large-scale analysis across your entire system, maybe for capacity planning or maybe for kind of higher-level visibility into how your entire infrastructure is performing, that starts to become very difficult because you're pulling data from many different sources and potentially having to log into different machines. Right. And so the other part of that is that bringing on new metrics starts to become more and more time consuming because you need to first identify the system, then identify the area where the metrics are actually being stored. You might have to talk to a couple different teams in order to figure that out. And so it gets a little tricky to, as these systems grow in complexity, to add additional metrics to those systems. And so when we talk to customers and we talk to users about starting to set up some sort of observability or some sort of monitoring platform, we break it into what we call a monitoring maturity model. And it's really broken down into 5 different steps. And the idea is a lot of these steps seem very obvious in retrospect. But for a company or an organization starting from very little or starting from disparate monitoring systems, basically creating a way to organize the stages and the steps as you progress through this into what we like to call nirvana, which is the what if analysis and prediction, helps kind of level set and provides you a path forward for those different areas of growth. So, I'm gonna walk through each of these in detail, but starting from the very simple, collecting all the information in a single location, being able to correlate that information and triage problems as they happen, looking for trends in that data manually. Basically, once you have an idea of what these trends are, starting to build alerting and notification systems on top of that, and then obviously at the very end, predicting where you're running machine learning models into to figure out proactively what's going to fail and when. So let's walk through each of those steps in a little more detail. So collecting the data sounds really simple, but putting together a plan for actually implementing it across a large company or a large organization can be a little tricky. And so, we break it down into discrete steps. Starting with taking an inventory of all of the metrics that you're collecting today. So as I mentioned before, it's pretty rare that you find an organization out there that isn't collecting any metrics at all. Usually the metrics are being collected behind the scenes in a system, and you just need to track kind of where those metrics are and what they are. So once you have an idea of all of the different metrics that are available to you, then we start looking at kind of some higher level discussions that you should have about kind of why you're collecting all of this information, right? What's the actual goal about the system that you're monitoring? So an example of this, right? If you are looking at a Kubernetes cluster, right? There's a couple different layers and a couple different levels of metrics that you can gather when you're looking at this information. And depending on the goal, maybe your goal is I'm the team that's focused on maintaining the hardware that's running our Kubernetes cluster. And so I'm really interested in infrastructure metrics about the cluster, not necessarily application metrics about what's running in the cluster. And so, understanding the goal and the information that you actually are interested in helps you identify kind of the areas that you're missing or the information that you might be missing in order to have a complete picture. So the other part of collecting the data is understanding how you're collecting that information. There's a lot of different ways to collect data in a system. You can pull data from known file locations. You can, there's a lot of different protocols and a lot of different mechanisms to get that information in. At a high level, they can kind of be broken down into two categories. One of them is a push solution, where you're actively pushing information into your monitoring and metric system. The other one is a pull system, where you're exposing metrics and you expect something to, on a regular interval, go through and scrape those metrics. They have benefits to each. So push is really great for events that happen at irregular time periods, right? And so if you're thinking about HTTP requests or anything like that. Pull is really useful for infrastructure metrics that you want to collect at a regular interval, CPU, memory, that type of stuff. So all just depends, but having an understanding of how you're actually collecting that information is important to get started. So you know what data that you're actually collecting, but what does that data actually look like, and how does it correlate to actual stuff that you're interested in? And so step 2 is really taking that information and figuring out what dimensions the data is being collected at, and what timeframes, right? And so when I talk about this, thinking again, going back to the Kubernetes example, I'm collecting information at a bunch of different dimensions, right? There's a cluster dimension, there's a node dimension, there's a pod dimension, there's even a container dimension, and there might be something even finer grained. But understanding that those dimensions and the frequency of the data that you're collecting is important. The other notion is you start seeing this data at a regular interval. You start establishing baselines for data availability. So this is really important in the IoT space. If you expect data to come at a regular frequency, or you expect data to come intermittently as events happen in the field, right? And so you start understanding, what are my what are my metrics for availability for this particular data source? Is it always on? Should I always expect data every 5 seconds, or should I expect data, roughly every 6 hours, depending on when the device wakes up? And again, going back to that idea of what are you missing? What dimensions am I missing? How can I slice the data? If I'm playing around with the data, is there some view that I don't have access to that I need to reconsider and think about how the data is being collected? One thing I forgot to mention, kind of as you're going through each of these steps, it's not always a left to right progression in this process. You might get to a certain step and then go back and take a look at other steps. So in this case, if you're missing a dimension, you're missing something that you need, jump back to step 1 and start and look at how the data is being collected and what you need to change and where that information is coming from. Once you have the data being collected at the right dimension level and the right granularity, you start looking at trends. And usually when people are looking at trends for information, they're looking at dashboards of the data, right? And so you start looking at the shape over a period of minutes, hours, days, and you start kind of understanding, oh, well, this data is roughly usually between 50 and 70%. Or this information kind of has this sign shape, and you start identifying in your head and kind of thresholds for alerting. If you come in one morning and you see a huge spike in CPU usage, right? That's something that you need to take a look at right away and see what's going on, right? And so again, if you think about this in the IoT space, kind of what are your safety levels? What are your variations? Getting a good feel for that, for your metrics and what they look like, is really important for the coming steps. Next, you want to notify and act, right? So, we have a saying at Influx where, you shouldn't have to look at a dashboard to know something's wrong, and that's really what this step is all about. So, you've identified trends in your head, and this is all about codifying those trends into alerting rules and checks on the data that are always running behind the scenes, even when you're not there, right? And so, this step. This is where most companies of any significant size get to and feel pretty good, but it's something that they're constantly tuning, right? And so you might set up a new alert and then head home and you get 1,000 pages in the middle of the night. Well, obviously you're going to go in and change that notification going forward. It's constantly being tuned as new services are brought up and taken down. You start to tweak those rules. These are where all the thresholds that you identified in step 3, really become important, and you start codifying them in actual code and configuration in your system. And then finally, we start moving to step 5, which is the prediction and the what if analysis. So everything up to this point has been relatively manual. You start getting into step 4, you're kind of automating the detection of all of this stuff. And now you want to move into an area where you're actually doing more predictive analysis. So, an example of this is when you're, if you're thinking about your infrastructure metrics, and usually when your hard drive starts to die, you start seeing errors over here. You start seeing, an increased number of read errors, higher latency. You can kind of use those to, take those metrics, put them into a machine learning model or some sort of predictive function that gives you a probability of whether that hard drive is going to fail or not, and then proactively go out to that site or proactively order a replacement drive for that infrastructure. This is again one of those things that only a few companies really get to, but once they do, right, they're able to really accelerate and kind of have that proactive approach. The other way to think about this is outside infrastructure metrics, proactive ways to reach out to customers on their behalf to identify problems before they happen, right? And we use this at our company to proactively reach out to users, when they're approaching the limits of anything relating to their data in terms of cardinality or sizing. We can proactively reach out and figure out, if they need more space, if there's some sort of problem with the data schema that we can help correct. Anytime you're proactively reaching out to users, right? It's obviously a much better experience than them filing a Sev1 support ticket in the middle of the night. So if we think about these 5 steps we've kind of outlined, right? Data collection, really looking at the trends of that data, building alerting off of that information, and then building predictive analytics. We start to think about how Influx Data can help you solve those different problems. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, Influx Data is a time series platform that's really built and designed around the new workload requirements that we identified, right? That shift from monolithic to microservice, that shift from individual devices to virtual machines and containers, or that shift from large machines to IoT sensors. Those new workload requirements is what Influx Data time series platform was built around. It's built for insanely high volume of real-time writes and querying that data, and so that's what we're built around. We can ingest regular events, regular metrics, down to the nanosecond precision, and once the data is in our platform, we allow you to easily build aggregations and summations on top of that information. So you can see in real time how your system is doing at an aggregate level, or you can drill down specifically to the individual sensor or the individual machine and get that granularity as well. It's designed to be distributed. It's designed to be fast and always available. And so the idea is to give your development team and your builders a head start so they don't have to build everything from scratch on top of an existing relational database. When we talk about a platform as opposed to just a data store, really it's focused around more than just the actual storage of the data. So it includes everything that you need to collect the information into the system, talk directly to the IoT sensors, talk directly to the infrastructure mechanisms for background processing of that data in the platform, and then also visualization and building out more advanced applications on top of it. So all of that is kind of contained in a single platform, which is much more than just a place to store your time series data. So different products that we offer, as I mentioned before, InfluxDB is at the core. It's an open source tool. It's designed to be a single binary, really focused around a time to awesome for your developer team. Get up and running really quickly, start pushing metrics in, and visualize those metrics. It's great for doing local development. It's great for doing edge processing where you don't have access to the cloud at all times. We also have our InfluxDB Cloud, which runs on any of the major cloud platforms. It's a pay for what you use, and we have a free tier that is free forever for kind of hobby use cases. And then once you validate that it's working, or once you grow to a certain size, you move into a pay for what you use. And obviously, if you're a large company, we definitely have the ability to do reserve capacity or dedicated instances, which you can talk to us about. And then we also have Influx Enterprise, which is your on-prem. If you like to manage your own infrastructure, InfluxDB Enterprise, you can scale. It's designed to be node-based. You can scale to whatever size you need, and you can host everything in your own infrastructure. Now, the awesome thing about all of these different offerings is they all have a common API, and so applications that you build against one can be moved freely between all of them, right? And so this common API means that Telegraph, our data collector, can talk to all of them really easily. But also if you're building custom integrations or custom applications, and your needs change or your scale or your size changes, you don't have to redesign your application. All you have to do is change the connection details of your app, and you're up and running. And so the idea is, you can build against any of them and run on all of them. Going into a couple of use cases that are really handy, and I won't read through all of this. We have many more detailed use cases on our website, including this one. But specifically for kind of the DevOps use case, when you're a company that is looking for high uptime, near 100% uptime, you need observability into all of your platforms, because a single failure can really impact that uptime guarantee. And so Coupa went with Influx Data for bringing all of that data into a single place quickly and easily, and being able to consume that information in real time and make changes. And a similar story with New Voice Media. So they build voice, email, chat, communication infrastructure. And so again, really needing that visibility to react to changes quickly and support their uptime guarantees. They were able to solve that with the Influx Data platform. So again, stepping back to this monitoring maturity model, as I mentioned before, a lot of these items are probably obvious in retrospect, but breaking them out into discrete chunks and creating a roadmap and a plan for moving from where you are today. And you might already be on one of these steps, right? You don't have to start from the very beginning all the time. And moving from where you are today to where you want to be, and identifying and putting together a plan can help that make the case internally and grow your monitoring solution. And that's really all I had for today. And if you want to get started with Influx Data right now, jump onto our website. Like as I mentioned before, our cloud product has a free forever tier. All you need is an email address, no credit card information. Jump in and you can get started in a few minutes. You can also use our open source product, download it, run it on your machine, and get started that way. And then, we really hope that you join us in our community. So obviously, we do a ton of open source development in our Influx Data repo, but we also have a thriving community Slack. I'm in there all the time chatting with our users and our customers. So join us there. You can also post to our community forum, which is monitored regularly by us as well as other community members. And so plenty of ways to get in touch with us. And if you have any questions or enhancements. So again, thanks for joining me today for the 5 steps to monitoring Nirvana. Hopefully it can help you and your team put together a plan to get from where you are today into an elevated state of metrics and monitoring. So thank you very much.
Hey, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that. Now, we're going to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor and chief content officer, who's going to give us the news, webinar preview, and a great interview with Jacqueline Miller, NTT Managed Services America.
Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Tuesday headlines. First up on DevOps.com, we have a Q&A with Platora's Chief Marketing Officer, Bob Davis, who discusses with contributing writer George Hume the value of value stream management as a tool for greater visibility into delivery pipelines. You know, Platora has been banging the value stream management drum since before the pandemic hit, and now more than ever, it seems value stream management has a major role to play in ensuring organizations not only derive the technological value, but also the business value of a tool or process. Bob says organizations are moving to value stream management as a platform to provide that visibility across an entire tool chain, from the idea to production. In the new work-from-home era, having that visibility is even more important in helping developers and other IT members understand how what they do impacts the organization as a whole. It's something that might not be apparent with everyone working in a different location. And we have an article that looks at different operations models and how they differ from one another. DevOps, NoOps, AIOps. Each are effective operating models in the right environment. It's up to the organization to evaluate and determine the appropriate system for its products and customers with three concepts in mind: cost, goals, and experimentation. Smart operations investments will ensure adaptability, competitive advantage, and customer loyalty. But there's no one-size-fits-all approach and easy-to-follow recipe for each enterprise. This article takes a look at each of the three operations models listed and how cost and customer needs should be major considerations in organizations' decision-making. All right, over on Container Journal, we have an article about the shift to microservices, which is fueling database expansion. This is based on a survey of 300 enterprise IT organizations with revenues of more than 100 million, which I believe would be the enterprise. And that was the survey was commissioned by Redis Labs and conducted by IDC. The survey suggests that the rise of microservices is driving a significant expansion in the number of databases that IT teams will need to manage in the cloud-native era. The survey found that nearly half of microservices applications rely on a database, with 84% of them employing a key value or NoSQL database. Most microservices are built using containers, with each stateful microservice typically having its own database. The change of application architecture into microservices significantly impacts the data layer supporting these services. A more distributed data layer naturally creates challenges around database deployment, workflows, management, and differing requirements per service. Certainly, these survey results show a level of complexity in cloud-native technologies, which means there is lots of opportunity for vendors that aim to quell the chaos, as it were. Redis Labs is just one of them. Over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at the growing threat of insider risk as an attack vector in the work-from-home age. Even before the pandemic, collaboration technologies and SaaS platforms expanded threat surfaces outside the network perimeter, making it much easier for employees to exfiltrate data without getting caught. Then, as the workforce shifted almost immediately to a remote model, the risk was exacerbated, and many securities teams were unprepared to deal with the rising threat. This article takes a look at the findings from Code 42's Data Exposure Report and discusses some of the ways organizations can eliminate insider risk, including recognizing insider risk indicators and creating a formal insider risk program. Long story short, No company is immune to insider risk. The sooner your organization recognizes and works to mitigate it, the better. And finally, we have a fascinating article that looks at how building cognitive awareness can help an organization dramatically improve its response to crises, including cybersecurity incidents. The article was written by a clinical psychologist and a former member of a Ministry of Defense in a particular country, which one I can't remember. And it offers up 3 ways that security leaders can better prepare to combat threats and overcome cognitive biases to respond more effectively in times of crisis. One of those tools is cognitive agility, which helps us understand when to trust our instincts and when to question them. For a cybersecurity crisis, developing cognitive agility means developing the mental capabilities of the individual responders themselves and arming them with the skill of agile thinking rather than the ability to respond to a predefined set of situations. This article is a great read, and it offers an interesting perspective on how we can adjust our response in crisis situations to one that depends on enhanced ways of thinking and learning to defend against cyber threats of any magnitude. All right, that's all I have for the headlines. Please check back with us on Thursday when I'll have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, have a great day and stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Jacqueline Miller, who is the CISO at NTT Managed Services Americas. Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. How was your holiday?
It was great. It's a pleasure to be here. How was your holiday?
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Thanks. As always, it's always good to take the time off. But now that we're in a new year and hopefully a lot of changes happening over the year, one of the things that I'm really going to be focusing on for the new year, as I just mentioned to you offline, but is the I want to increase the profile of diversity in technology in general. Cybersecurity, it has we've been talking a little bit about it because there's just such a large talent shortage in cybersecurity. But I really think that technology would benefit as a whole with a greater diversity across its ranks. And so, as a woman and in the C-suite in technology, I really wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the topic, where you see we are in, I don't want to say the struggle to become more diverse, but definitely the journey to become more diverse as a sector in general, and whether you think we're doing the right stuff and we're getting any better at it.
Yeah, I do think things are progressing in terms of diversity in the technology industry as a whole. I'm going to focus more, I think, on cybersecurity, since that's my day-to-day bread and butter. And diversity is a topic that I'm passionate about and talk about frequently within my organization and outside of my organization with some of the groups and networks that I'm connected to. I think one of the key things that I hear from women right now that's still an issue that we need to work harder on is that having role models or people that look like them or sound like them, basically women at the top, is still a huge gap for us, even though we are formalizing as organizations, as companies, as leadership teams, we're formalizing our diversity and equity inclusion initiatives, which matters a lot, right? Because we're getting it down in writing and telling people that we want to see better representation and that we care about their differences and that they're important to us in our growth strategies. But it's kind of the money where your mouth is problem, where if we don't have women that are at the top of those conversations and that are visible leaders to the young talent that we have and that we're trying to grow in cybersecurity, it kind of creates a little bit of tension or dichotomy in terms of the messaging and what's really happening in the world. So I think there needs to be a lot of focus, not on the whole career cycle, not only on the whole career cycle for women in tech and in cybersecurity, but we really need to put more focus on elevating those voices at the top level of our conversations. One of the biggest issues I see too is like, when we're doing conferences or webinars about women in technology, we still have panels that are kind of full of men. And while men need to be part of the conversation, right? They are half of the conversation for sure. Right. Having a full panel of men talking about diversity and women in cybersecurity is pretty problematic. So I think that's, kind of an easy thing that we can fix as an industry, and that needs to have an open conversation about it. It's not to point fingers, it's to point out the issue so that we can fix it. And I think, having those conversations is important.
Yeah, I agree. And as a matter of fact, for a lot of the panels that we do put together here at Media Ops for TechStrong TV and for webinars and pretty much anything that we have that's on camera and is customer facing, if you will, we make it a point to make sure that we have a varied lineup of speakers, men, women, people of color, every group that can be represented is represented, and sometimes it can be difficult because I think traditionally women have been maybe not as in the spotlight as the men have, and that's kind of that gender bias that's been around for a very, very long time, and it is slow to changing. But it is changing. I mean, I'm talking to you right now, and you're a CISO, and it's great to see that. But at what point do you think we're really going to have true parity? Do you think we're ever going to have true parity?
I think it's going to take a large shift for that to happen. I think, it definitely, we need to continue to examine our demographics of women entering tech. And the other thing that we really have to understand about cybersecurity as an industry, it had to grow very quickly and out of the IT industry. So that did pull a lot of men over, right? We have that gender bias in IT already. It pulled a lot of it over into cybersecurity. There's still a lot of open roles to be filled. There's still the job gap in cybersecurity, and that's going to continue to be an issue as, we've seen, the SolarWinds hack happen just this past, through December. There's still going to be a lot of hiring for cybersecurity. We need to make sure that we are feeding women into that pipeline to help fix that gap. And it's going to take almost, maybe 5 to 10 years to even get close to those parity numbers that we're seeking to hit. And those women can't always come out of university or college programs. I think from a representation standpoint, it gets easier when you have role models that look like you, that talk like you, that you want to model your career after. But it's also important to recognize that sourcing strategies don't have to be 100% perfect. A lot of people in general got into IT, into cybersecurity through unusual channels. I'll call them unusual channels, but really they're pretty common. It isn't always through just a 4-year degree program. And I think that's something that we have to look at to really fix this dichotomy in gender diversity, as well as, race diversity and cultural diversity within the industry.
Yeah, I agree. And, folks who I've spoken with especially in cybersecurity, to your point, so many of them have kind of come in through non-traditional paths and kind of moved into cybersecurity from completely different roles at either at the same company or other companies. But it was like the one thing that kind of lit their light bulb, if you know what I mean. They were really, really digging it, and it just became kind of what they really, really wanted to do. And I think having that level of interest is super important in cybersecurity. And I feel like, obviously growing up, if you were a girl and you were interested in that kind of stuff, you were just almost a pariah, an outcast, a geek, and I think we're still, as a society, still trying to get past that. And I think if we have women at the top who are championing these women coming into, or encouraging them to come into cybersecurity and IT in general, I think we could actually get to parity faster than maybe 10 years from now. But I do believe that we still have an uphill battle to climb. At the same time, though, I kind of feel like there are efforts to elevate women just because of the fact that they're women, and it's just, and the focus tends to be on the gender rather than their expertise, what they can actually bring to the table. And I wonder if we're kind of walking a fine line here when we talk about having a greater diversity in the workforce and really focusing on the women and females in IT. How can we get it to be to the point where we are not only we're championing them as women in IT who bring that that thought leadership and that brain trust, not just because they're a woman. How do we do that?
Yeah, definitely. It is an interesting transition that's happening, and I've engaged with a number of conversations on this topic, especially when you get to like conference season. So there are some big names in cybersecurity, women speakers, and they're fantastic, right? Like I would never turn down an opportunity to listen to them talk, but they tend to get overpicked for those discussions. And one of the things is like, once you start to progress your career at those top levels of cybersecurity, you really have to start being conscious about the opportunities to take steps back and allow new voices to come through, and just make sure it's not the same women kind of rinse repeat speaking on these topics every single time. I think that's a bigger issue than necessarily elevating women who may not be because they're women, not because they're skilled. I think that the combination of highly skilled women and the fact that they're women, they tend to get overpicked for a lot of these discussions. And they are developing networks. We are developing networks, I would say. And we know that there are people out there that are really growing into highly specialized areas, and they're doing really interesting and emerging things within cybersecurity. And we have to make sure that we are kind of carving out space to bring in those additional voices. The other thing too is making sure that we have balanced panels as much as possible. When we're doing panel discussions and having both men and women, diversity of backgrounds, races and cultures in those discussions, the more diverse of those panels we can show, then we open up multiple seats for very talented people to come to the forefront, instead of having that kind of repeat of the same speakers all the time. And I think that's an issue that happens with men too, within cybersecurity and within tech in general, right? There are those that get to the top and they're highly sought after for a reason. But over time, the tech industry is always about transformation. It is always about, digital disruption of what we were doing last year. So there needs to be a constant refresh of voices talking about the topics in our industry.
Yeah, I agree. I can tell you from experience that when I was doing the conference circuit, and I would go to an annual show for a very, we'll just say a very large technology vendor, and the CEO came out, it's like, oh yeah, I've heard this one again. It's like, this is the fourth time I've heard this particular conversation. And it used to drive me up a wall. It's like, really, they've done nothing in 4 years, and it's the same conversation. But yeah, I get that. And I do agree also that, I think, on the other side, I think sometimes it can be hard to kind of find those people to speak and tell their story. Some people just aren't really willing to do that. They would much rather kind of, keep their head down and do their thing. But I think it's necessary if we're going to champion diversity and inclusion and understanding of all genders and races and ethnicities, I think people need to be willing to step up and have those conversations. And sometimes it can be frightening if you've never done it before, or if you're just not that kind of outgoing kind of personality. But I think I think it's important that we hear all the voices. So what are you guys doing anything at NTT, or are you personally involved in any programs that are helping kind of further the cause, if you will, of women in cybersecurity?
Absolutely. So we have a diversity, equity, inclusion initiative within our on regional impact nonprofits and networking organizations to get our employees engaged with. So with NTT Managed Services Americas, we're headquartered out of Southfield, Michigan, and we've partnered with and sponsored MCWT, Michigan Council for Women in Technology, and we fund memberships as part of that. We're effectively funding memberships for our women in technology and women leaders into that organization. And that is a fantastic network across multiple industries of other female leaders. There's multiple opportunities to take leadership roles, but also just network with other technologists and cybersecurity specialists. The other thing that program does is it's a great feeder for our internship program. So we pull, basically kind of just out of high school or university age students that are involved with MCWT and have been in the early Girls in STEM initiatives from that feeder system, and we pull them into our academy model, into our internship programs, and help them grow, explore and grow their careers in cybersecurity. So we've turned many interns from that program into full-time employees, which has been fantastic. The other thing is the MCWT, and we sponsor the scholarship program there. Mm-hmm. But it involves mentoring. So, myself and my peers are able to, over the period of a year or even multiple years, depending on the scholarship program, be able to follow a young woman as she develops her career through the traditional university process, and make connections and for her in the cybersecurity space.
That's great. That's great. I'm really that's. I imagine you have a pretty large group taking part in that. It sounds like it's just a huge win for them. So not only just to have that population of women behind you, kind of supporting you as you go along, but you also get the advantage of their knowledge and expertise as well. So good stuff. Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for walking me through this. I hope to have future conversations with you, but not too many because we don't want to burn you out. But
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but let's stay in touch and talk more about this later on, another time.
Absolutely, sounds great.
Okay. All right,
Thank you
great.
again.
Yeah, you're welcome. Everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Tuesday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with the Tuesday webinar preview. As always, I tell you about some of the webinars that we have coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard in the hopes that you will be able to mark your calendar and join us. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the ones we have coming up. First up, we have Keep Calm and Secure Your CI/CD Pipeline. That one is happening Wednesday, January 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it is sponsored by WhiteSource. This webinar is all about shifting security left in the software development lifecycle and focuses on how to create a secure continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. The speaker is Sonia Moiset, is lead security engineer at Photobox. She's also tech lead and security manager at Pride in London, and she will draw on her experiences in working with various technologies to create a secure end-to-end pipeline. She'll also go over some security concepts such as OWASP and show how to improve workflow for your own open source projects using GitHub Marketplace applications. Good stuff, definitely one worth checking out. Next up is using AI ML to fully automate your CI/CD pipeline with Harness and Datadog. It is happening Wednesday, January 27th as well. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, and it's sponsored by Harness. This webinar will take a look at some of the machine learning techniques that organizations can apply to automate deployment, verification, and health checks, specifically for enterprises utilizing Datadog. This is basically about taking that tribal knowledge that is held by multiple engineers with domain knowledge of the infrastructure and applications, and using machine learning to reduce the stress and agita associated with deployments. So bringing automation into the deployment game. Love it, love it, love it. So definitely give that one a look if you have the time and inclination. Third webinar today is called it's called Modernizing on IBM Z, Made Easier with Open Source Software. It's happening Thursday, January 28th at 11 a.m. on DevOps.com. It's sponsored by Rocket Software. This webinar features IDC analyst Al Gillen and Peter Frankel of Rocket Software as they take a deeper dive at the value proposition associated with using commercially supported open source software in mission critical environments such as IBM Z. In this webinar, they will discuss how OSS, open source software, can neutralize the disparity between seasoned IBM Z and emerging developers, the modernization initiatives that involve open source software, what to consider before bringing open source software to IBM Z, and how Rocket Software is delivering commercially supported open source software to IBM Z. Good stuff, especially if your organization does have mainframe environments, specifically the IBM Z mainframes. All right, that's all I have for this edition of the webinars. Please check back on Thursday. We'll have a brand new batch for you. Until then, have a great day, everybody, and stay safe.
All right. Thanks, Charlene. That was great. Now it's over to the analyst corner where Mitch has John Grange and Charlie Cuddy, CTO and Cloud Solutions Engineer, respectively, at Ops Compass. John and Charlie and Mitchell will be discussing as cloud and applications get more complex. There's a real need for transparency into what's happening in applications and the software stack. Really fundamental stuff right here. Mitch has a great interview with them. It runs almost a half hour. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Here's now Mitch Ashley, CEO, co-founder of Accelerated Strategy with Ops Compass.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I'm joined by a couple of really great folks to talk to, or I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion. Guys are from Ops Compass, John Grange, who's the CTO, and Charlie, we're going to dig into your background because you have an interesting background, but I have you guys introduce yourselves. Welcome, John. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about Ops Compass?
Sure. I'm John Grange. I'm co-founder and CTO of Ops Compass, and Ops Compass helps customers with cloud security and compliance What we like to say is it really helps the customers get that visibility, intelligence, and control around their public cloud environments, their multi-cloud environment. So we're obviously we'll talk a little bit more about it today, but right now is kind of a great time to be helping customers get their clouds more secure and do better in a multi-cloud environment.
Absolutely, challenge for all of us, I think. Many folks. Well, Charlie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Charlie Cuddy. I before joining Ops Compass had a background as a decade teaching math and some computer science at the high school level, and so joining the Ops Compass team and getting to work with some of the cloud vendors in educational spaces, getting up to speed in that regard, and just helping customers along the onboarding journey into the Ops Compass solution, as well as general education around some cloud best practices. It's been a lot of fun learning with these guys.
I got to imagine that that teaching expertise really comes in handy helping customers.
Yeah, one of the big pieces is the anticipation of where problems are going to happen. That's kind of the day in the life of a teacher and solving problems, and that's what Ops Compass does as well. So it's been a fun transition for sure.
All those high school students trained you well, I guess. Huh?
Helped my patience for sure.
There you go. Well, we're talking about visibility into DevOps. And of course, we probably should start with a little bit of level setting. Visibility can mean a lot of things, right? It can be just about containers, or other observability might get confused with that. So maybe, John, if you can kind of give us a working definition of what you mean by visibility.
Sure, and kind of like you alluded to, it's a word that means a lot, no matter kind of which direction you're coming from. We tend to look at visibility in a very holistic way. When customers want visibility, what they really want is not just the it's not just the ability to know that they can see an object in their environment, or they can see something that's going on in their cloud. It's actually more about getting insights, transparency, and then you said observability, and I think observability is a great word, but observability is really like a property. So a tool like Ops Compass, for instance, we help facilitate observability, which we feel like is part of visibility itself. So observability is one of those things where if you know enough about the internal state of your of the environment in question, you can start to identify problems maybe before you even knew that those were going to be problems. And we've really identified that as kind of the core place where customers who are both moving to the cloud and also becoming more DevOps mature, really moving towards that, moving down the road on that DevOps journey quicker. That's really what they're looking for. And for us, like I've just heard countless DevOps professionals, managers of DevOps professionals, they always say they really feel like they lack visibility, but it's tough to articulate what they really mean, because there's always a way to go into the CLI and run a quick command and maybe see all the resources you have, or it means something that's more, there's something more subtle and I think more sort of enterprise scale, I guess, when we talk about visibility, intelligence, and then control.
Mm-hmm. We have many things going on that are kind of changing in our world, but software architectures are rapidly changing, getting much more smaller, containerized microservices, things like that. So there's a lot more things to know about to be able to get information. And then we're also creating software differently, right? We're doing it much more rapidly through tool chains, through automation. So it's really easy to not know what all you're really getting when it gets into an operational state, goes into production. And so now how do you triage, diagnose, know what problems, where the issues are, and then who to go to and how to solve them, right? It's a complex world we're creating for ourselves, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think what also plays into that is that you have with kind of the microservices based architecture, now you have a lot more little Lego pieces to keep track of, but you also have more users and identities interacting with the cloud. And the twist, I think, in kind of the modern multi-cloud landscape today is that a lot of those identities that are making changes in your cloud, that are doing things, are actually non-human entities. It's service identities and things of that nature. Sometimes they're your service identities. Sometimes they're actually the cloud's. So it just adds like a whole nother kind of dimension to what visibility, I guess, really means from the cloud perspective.
I'm curious, Charlie, is that consistent with what you hear from customers, some of the problems and challenges that they're looking for?
Yeah, you know, one of the pieces we hear all the time from people, whether they're kind of just getting started in the cloud and trying to implement a DevOps process versus being well established, is that they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what they should be looking for. So it's like that level of visibility of, I know I can get everything, but what out of everything is important, or what out of what I'm looking at here is something that I should care about right now. That part of visibility and the definition around, you know, what is really helpful.
It's more about the right stuff that I need to know about, not just more.
Yeah.
Quantity is not clearly better.
No one's cloud's getting smaller, right? So it's just kind of keeping track of that is really big.
Very true. Well, I know you guys work with many customers, and John, we were talking earlier about maybe some more public examples of where visibility comes into play. Maybe you can share some of those ideas with us.
Yeah, sure. You know, the kind of security related issue that's top of mind right now is obviously the SolarWinds breach. And that one's really complicated and doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the cloud. And one of the things that kind of flew under the radar was, you know, Cisco had an ex-Cisco employee was just recently convicted. And they essentially, a bunch of virtual machines that were powering a Cisco product got deleted. And one of the interesting things about that is that it was actually an employee that had been gone for a number of months. And they used Terraform and accidentally blew away a bunch of their former employers' cloud resources. And that to me was this perfect example of what it means to really have visibility. The clouds themselves have lots of different tools, and, you know, big companies like Cisco, I'm sure, have all sorts of different processes. But, you know, there's still an identity that was enabled that somebody had the ability to unknowingly, you know, still have access to. And it just sort of points to the problem of, you know, do you really know what you have? You know, is it, and more than just kind of your, you know, configuration management database type stuff, but like, do you really know what's going on? I think that's maybe where that observability piece comes in a little bit. But I think that's a great example of, it's really hard to do this stuff if your teams don't have a really good idea, kind of like a single source of truth for like what's really out there. Not just in our DevOps pipelines, potentially in a configuration file somewhere, but what do we really have going on out there?
You know, in the old days of change control, we could do a inventory and then kind of manage to that in a dynamic Terraform software. You know, the infrastructure is software that's changing all the time. So you really have to have a more of an automated way, or at least something to stay on top of it, because you can't do the old, let's update the spreadsheet with our inventory, right? How about
and there's a,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
I was going to say, you know, there's a spectrum, and this might have been where you're going, of where you really need to have visibility. And it's, you know, you mentioned the infrastructure as code and some of these different things that DevOps teams are leveraging. It also is important that you think about visibility holistic, so that you're not, you know, locking yourself into, hey, we've got a lot of processes in this DevOps pipeline to have kind of some visibility and some checks and some governance before things ever hit the cloud. You know, oftentimes that can give you kind of this false sense of security that everything that hits the cloud is going to be perfect. And now you're maybe not having the level of detailed visibility that you need in the cloud itself. So I think that's another piece, is thinking about it more as thinking about that whole process as more of a cycle, or maybe even like a spectrum, where you have to really cover the whole piece of it if you really are going to do it right.
Very interesting. Charlie, I know you work with a lot of customers. Without divulging any secrets, anything you shouldn't, can you kind of share with us maybe some general experiences you've seen where this is even more important in our world today?
Yeah, you know, we talk a lot about like a single pane of glass and being able to look, across clouds with all of the different, Terraforms like you guys were talking about, and then having that across clouds, but then also having a consistent way within the teams, to really communicate about what's actually getting out there in the cloud. The security and compliance teams that we're working with, have a lot of different priorities than the DevOps teams, but there's an overlap that needs to happen, and a communication piece that needs to happen in order to securely make sure the stuff that's touching the cloud is what is supposed to be out there. And so that's been a really unique way of working within Ops Compass with the customer base that we have, is just kind of seeing how our solution can really integrate with that kind of people process piece of a lot of the companies that we're talking with.
So if I'm hearing you right, are you saying that different teams kind of do things differently? Some may do a great job of really pulling together that information. Others, we'll worry about it later. So you can have real inconsistent results in your operations environment of what you really know about what you've got, what's happening. And of course, then you can do your analysis and visibility into what's happening. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And, that's right on with what we're saying. We see a lot of times when we get installed at some of these companies is, the security and compliance team comes looking for the DevOps type team or and say, hey, why are we doing it this way? This is what's out here in the cloud. And I thought we had this in place and this in place. And then also being able to work with the DevOps teams to, deploy things out, whether it's through their Terraform or however they're deploying, see what actually touches the cloud, and they get immediate feedback within Ops Compass to start making some of those tweaks and keep things, what's in our control to make sure that we kind of keep these security and compliance people off our back and, kind of stay in line with the overall, security posture and plan that they have in place.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So one of the things I'm curious is both of your perspective on just the last, let's say 9 months. I guess we're kind of on our anniversary now of the whole start of the COVID situation, but there's all kinds of data about the acceleration of digital transformation projects, acceleration going into the cloud, people being required to do different things in software, maybe new things or adjusting products for contactless delivery, whatever it might be. Our environment's changed, but we've also really accomplished a lot technology-wise in the last 9 months. That has to impact folks like an operations team, right? Because we're not doing things the same way. We may have accelerated our adoption of DevOps or cloud native architectures, and now even more of it's changed. What's your perspective on it, John?
That you make a great point, and what immediately came to my mind was, on top of all that, adopting. We all know that companies. It's a bit of a struggle and a paradigm shift to adopt cloud to begin with, and then to accelerate it. That's a big deal. And on top of that, these infrastructure and operation teams are having to do it working remotely. Whether you're in accounting or HR, no matter what you do, I think we've all been affected a little bit by having to, do our jobs, working remotely, not being able to walk down the hall and maybe talk to somebody. And I think when you combine that these infrastructure and operations teams have, probably lost maybe a little bit of headcount in a lot of areas, and the companies are accelerating their adoption of cloud. Cloud also has become a little bit more business critical in a lot of these situations. There's a lot of pressure and a lot of just new things going on and shifts in that kind of infrastructure operations, cloud ops area. I think DevOps, or developers are a little bit more used to working remotely. It's been a more kind of normal thing for quite a while for developers and development teams to be distributed, but it's not as normal for the infrastructure and operations teams. So I think that's been the biggest shift and the biggest kind of challenge that I've seen customers have.
Yeah, you're not operating out of a SOC or an operations center nearly to the degree that we were pre-COVID. And who knows? I mean, maybe we aren't going back to that world. Maybe we'll stay remote, or at least largely so in the future. Is that the kind of impact you've seen on customers, Charlie? You've seen other things happening?
Yeah, that's really consistent with what I've been seeing. And kind of what John was talking about, not being able to go next door. One of the pieces that we hear often around just best practices and tracking, even like just permissions is, normally you could have, someone sit next to you and kind of look over your shoulder and talk through some things. And now, granting different permissions so that you can see the same types of things in the cloud and and tracking, who has access to what and those types of things has also been, big questions that we're getting around what are the best practices to make sure that we're securely handling the situation on hand.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, are there things specifically around DevOps and how we create software using those techniques that make visibility even more challenging or more important? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that with DevOps in particular, I mentioned infrastructure as code earlier, and one of the challenges is that a lot of these companies that are a little bit more mature, frankly, doing really well. You start with an app, maybe a couple apps. They might not be production level, but eventually those things become production, and now you kind of have a cloud operation. Securing a single pipeline and application, or maybe a couple, with your kind of innovation dev team is not really that hard. It's kind of completing a project. You don't have any scale problems. Now, once the cloud strategy becomes more of an enterprise strategy, now it's a whole different ballgame. It's much more different than, hey, we've got some controls in our pipeline for this project. It's okay, we might have 50 or 60 or 100 different projects, and all sorts of different service identities, provisioning different things. How do we really make sure that we know what's going on here? The other thing is that oftentimes, business units, or maybe it's even through M&A, different kind of parts of the organization often have varying levels of autonomy when it comes to cloud. So infrastructure and operations teams often struggle with, in the data center world, there was the network perimeter in the data center, and nobody messed with that, and infrastructure owned it. And now, infrastructure and operations might be responsible for a number of aspects of the cloud, but they might not have as much control over all the entities using the cloud. So now you sort of have to calibrate how you're implementing your guardrails, where are your controls, and all the while you have to make sure you have visibility across the whole thing. So all this stuff works really well in sort of this perfect world scenario and kind of a small number of projects and things, but there's a lot more details and kind of dimensions to the problem as you scale that out across a whole organization.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Charlie? I'm curious what you're seeing with customers.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd point out as it being such a common problem is Microsoft, Amazon leaning so heavily on their well-architected frameworks, working back on cloud adoption frameworks, and they're clearly hearing this from customers of all sizes and trying to build out these frameworks to really help based on specific situations to kind of get people in alignment on what should we be doing in this situation. And so I think that just kind of speaks to how common it is to kind of trying to find your way, I guess, around as you're scaling those applications.
I'm thinking too, if you're multi-cloud, right now you're trying to do that across multiple providers with different services, similar but different, different tool chains for doing software development, or builds and check-in or whatever it might be. It gets very complex quick. It's already complex. We add multi-cloud into the picture too. Great. Well, I'd love to turn to an announcement I know that you all just made around, I think it's a free version of your product. Can you tell us a little bit about that, John?
Yeah, we're really excited about it. We've talked about a number of the reasons why we felt like it's important to make to release a free version of Ops Compass. A lot of it comes down to we're really in tune to our community of customers and even potential customers. And like we talked about, the pandemic environment really sort of reshuffled the deck on cloud operations and DevOps and infrastructure operations. And small teams that are now supporting multi-cloud estates and things like that. And as we've talked about, visibility and beneath insights and observability, that's really kind of core to having a strong, secure cloud presence. So we wanted to really help out kind of our community of users, help out our customers and potential customers. And we're releasing a free edition of Ops Compass. It's perpetually free forever. And it focuses on our visibility functionality. So, real-time visibility into inventory configurations, things of that nature. So even at a base level, even if somebody doesn't have a huge cloud presence yet, or the pandemic environment's been rough on the company and there's not a lot of budget, it's a great tool that somebody can connect. They can get going. They have that basic visibility. They have the ability to stop a potential, ex-employee from accidentally or potentially purposely making making dangerous changes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're really excited about it, and again, we're hoping that it helps a lot of people out.
It's interesting. I'm curious if this is your experience too. There's the traditional enterprise software model, right? Selling it through a salesperson into whatever level of the organization. With free software, similar things with open source software too, is that's kind of the democratization of software, where individuals can say, I'm just going to download this, I'm going to check it out, I'm going to try it on some stuff, maybe I'll sandbox it for a while, maybe I'll use it, on a subset of production stuff. And that they build up a level of interest and competence, and then want to take it to the next level. So you can really give people to get some hands-on learning, experience, usage before you ever get to okay, now do I want to buy this, right? And now you've got somebody who's buying it because they know it works, right? It's a great model. Is that consistent with your experience?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of it comes down to, that's how I like to buy software. I like to play with the open source version. I like to shop around for the paid versions and kind of see what the difference is. So for us, we really wanted to make that sort of workflow a reality with Ops Compass. The other thing about it is, again, our users just kept telling us, man, we just really need more visibility. And at the same time, we're also, as we're looking at kind of our more traditional enterprise sales deals, all of the real decision making, maybe not the final kind of signature on the contract, but really all the real decision making is happening at the level of the people with hands on the keyboards. And so for us, it's just really important to get those product experiences with the important people, the practitioners, as early on as possible. So I can tell you that we've definitely seen a shift that was already kind of starting before the pandemic, but that just blew the doors wide open. So many of these decisions around cloud tooling is coming down to kind of the cloud ops team, the cloud architect. It's the people who are really experiencing the problems acutely and need the solution.
Do you think that you mentioned the remote aspect of COVID in the last year? Is that also part of what's driving up I just need something, let me try this out, I'll learn, experiment with it, solve some of my problems in the near term, develop up that point where they're also going to purchase it? Is that part of it too, this remote nature of the work?
Yeah, definitely. And also, we have a great free trial. It's a 14-day free trial. It's the full Ops Compass product. It's everything. But, we're really busy. We, cloud operations people, between working remotely, family obligations. A lot of people around the country have had kids that have been doing schooling at home still. So there's not time. So if somebody is interested in our free trial, they might not get to it in 14 days. And the nice thing about having a perpetually free product is there's that, we're busy DevOps people. We can go get it going, and we can have a perpetually free tool that has value, but we can kind of, kick the tires on a piece of software. I know for me, that's always really meaningful because I'm notorious for signing up for free trials and letting it expire before I get time to go really play with it.
There's the desire, and then there's to play with it, and then there's the actual, do I have time to really do what I need to do to exercise?
Yes.
Evaluate it, work with it. Yeah. Well, so you just announced this. I'm curious. So you're targeting developers, you're targeting operations folks, both. Who's the most likely person to say, great, let me use this free edition?
Oftentimes for us, it's a member of the DevOps team. And when it comes to titles, as I'm sure Mitch, like in the cloud world, it's companies are just inventing titles. Some of them are taking traditional titles and just moving them into cloud roles. So it's tough, but it's oftentimes, somebody who will have a DevOps something in their title, somebody from infrastructure and operations team who's maybe responsible in some way for security and or compliance in the cloud. Security teams definitely, but in these more cloud mature organizations that tend to need tools like this the most, they're getting better about those roles being a little bit more cohesive. And there might be a DevOps person that's really charged with security in the pipeline, but it's kind of that nebulous area of kind of DevSecOps maybe to throw another portmanteau in there.
And it really does change how you quote unquote sell. I mean, you're not necessarily selling directly, and you're in more of a developer relations, security engineer relations, ops relations, DevOps, whatever it is. But it's about supporting those folks that are going through that sort of free edition journey. And then some may and some may not, right? Get to that point where I really want to try the 14-day trial, or I want to buy the product, or I went to my management, I've got approval, great, we're already using it. Let's just get the license and go. But it's a different model for vendor companies to take on that common approach.
It's a different way to think about go-to-market. I mean, as you can imagine, our salespeople, at first didn't love the idea of a free edition for obvious reasons. But I think as a company, we're all on board. We're very kind of user oriented, and we all are on board with the user's environment has changed. So we have to be able to adapt with it, and we've got to meet the user where they are. And these decisions are largely being made from the bottom up inside these technology organizations. So we want to get, and the folks on those DevOps teams or in security teams, they're all about problem solving and saving them time. There's no other kind of extracurricular or anything. Nobody's getting on planes or going and doing steak dinners or anything. So it's really about, hey, can this solve my problem? Is this going to save me time? Is this going to maybe make me look like a rock star in my company? And that's really what we're shooting for. We want to make people, we want to make our users really look like heroes inside their organizations.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like, we definitely need salespeople. Well, would you rather walk into a situation where nobody's heard of you, or, oh, you're already using the free edition? How's it going? Oh, you ready to go to the next place? Yeah, great. Let's help you get there. They're already sold on it. So it can be a real asset to sales teams. I can understand that first reaction though. Oh, yeah. Good. Well, is there anything else about the announcement you wanted to make sure that we've touched on today?
I don't think I have anything. What about you, Charlie?
Oh, I mean, the ease of the signing up for the free trial, that's one of the great parts about Ops Compass. It's, give it permission and you're off and running. I mean, it's, we can get you connected and get your inventory populating in typically, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the size of your cloud. So that part of it, I think, is really exciting and kind of just adds to what John was saying around the, ask for a free trial and, wait for it to provision, wait to get it all set up, and then kind of forget about it. And this, you can essentially get it connected and check it out in that 15-minute window that you have to kind of explore. So
let it go to work, right?
Exactly.
That inventory. Well, excellent. Well, congratulations on the announcement of that. That's excellent. And it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll have this conversation in some months down the road and see what's changed, because it seems like, okay, this is the new normal. I don't think there's going to be a new normal. I think it's just a constant conveyor belt of change that we're on. It seems like.
I would agree.
So, well, congrats on that. And John, Charlie, good to be talking with you today. Be sure and check out Ops Compass, opscompass.com, if I remember correctly. And
yep, opscompass.com.
Free edition. So thanks, gentlemen.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks, Mitch.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hey, Mitchell, that was great. Good stuff. Congratulations to the Ops Compass people, by the way. Guys, that's going to, guys and gals, people, others, that's going to wrap today's TechStrong TV. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back on Thursday with fresh content. That will be January 28th. My God, January's flying by. We're going to be coming up in just another month or two with our 1-year anniversary of TechStrong TV. Hard to believe. We'll have to plan something special. Anyway, though, that's it for today. Stay safe, stay well, stay strong. TechStrong. We're out.